this thing called recent Tartarian, 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 Secretarians, Jason Page and Andreas Secretartarian, and Jason Page, recent Tartarian. Yeah. We about to have a conversation with Andreas Secretarius and Jason Page on recent Tartarians, the new video channel that he's putting up today. It has got things that you never make your mind spin around, things that you never heard before, and now we're about to get into a conversation that you never heard before on recent Tartarian. Yeah, recent Tartarian, with the baby, recent Tartarian, and Andre, recent Tartarian. All right, so let's get into it.
Well, welcome.
It's gone. If you didn't record that, that's gone forever. It's gone.
We always record that. Well, that's been kind of the long-standing thing. Recent Tartarians, everybody.
Right.
How's it going, Victor? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good now that I am here.
We also have Brittany. Brittany, how are you doing?
I'm doing excellent.
Epic. That's the librarius secretartarian of the entire thing that we created like a year ago. Isn't this crazy how this exists?
It's well over a year ago now, Andreas.
I like to imagine things have just been a few days, but yes, oh my gosh. Well, I thought we'd do kind of a reunion-y thing because it's been a long time coming that we kind of take on the new recent Tartarian upgrades. It's been a minute since we've talked about these things together, really about where things have come in the last year or two, really, from Mudflood, Tartarian, antique technology, pyroclastic flumes, alchemical mining operations. I think there's just so much more information we have today than we did when we started, and I wondered if you wanted to go over some of that.
Yeah, I'd love to. There's so many topics have come up the last year, mainly due to heavy hitters in the community. So yeah, and also some very good stuff just come from, let's say, random people or floaters a bit that just swing in and swing out and just drop mad bombs and leave again. Those exist as well. That happens a lot in the Facebook groups. So yeah, why I mainly like to pass a lot of time there, because sometimes someone will go in there and upload something that was in his or her private collection, and it will straight up blow everyone's minds sometimes. Yeah, right. So yeah.
There's also been Brittany, I think you were about to say something.
No, I was just saying, even today, there was a really great California map that was just dropped by someone that joined the Discord right before I was coming on here. I was just looking at that. So it's crazy, the things people share that you think you've seen before. And it's awesome to just jump in and have another brand, like a old map that I hadn't seen, to add to the collection.
Right. Well, also a lot of other things have gone on. Like I don't think you've touched on it before, Andreas, but something that has gone on the Discord is that Analog came to our Discord, and that unleashed a chain reaction that has led us to this weird project where we're tying this huge military operation that's going on right now called QAnon to Tartary.
Right, and
And
even you saw with the Peter Barry Sinewaves episode, we kind of continued what you and Analog had been talking about with BLM and how it's connected with Bureau of Land Management. So there's a number of military operations which are kind of crowding out, I think was Peter's word, the data. When we start looking for information on this data now, there's a lot of new information. But if you know how to go on Google and find things before 2016, you'll start to see these words are still being used, but they're being used more seldomly, and they have historical context. And that's why they're important today.
Yeah, for instance, Q uses like one of his comms is comb your hair, and that apparently comes from an old Tartarian poem about peace. Interesting, right? So an American Tartarian, so it's from the Iroquois, and you have that Q in those names. So a lot of the things that Ben and I have been looking into is how this letter Q has been revised or written out of so many places. And also something else that really surprised Ben and I early on was that apparently both Trump's and Kennedy's lines go back to something that is called the Q Celtic faction of the Celtic people. And they lived in Scotland and Ireland and Wales. And it's basically the whole mythology of Arthur and the Welsh immigration early on to America, like Prince Madoc. All these things tie this early history to QAnon and how a certain philosophical element was brought from Tartary to America to survive there. And that is what Manly P. Hall's books are about, the secret destiny of America. And this idea of an enlightened empire like Tartaria was. And I think that is why Tartaria was kept hidden until now, because we were supposed to have focus on this idea when it came out, because it's like the history is telling us what is the future. And as Q says, the future will prove the past. But what we're doing is we're taking the past and trying to base the future on that right now. And I find that fascinating because Tartary has a lot of, certainly a lot of historical elements that tie directly to QAnon. And yeah, I'm just scratching the surface here with these examples. For instance, like Trump's line, "Through the MacLeods," go back to Rurik the Tatar, who was the first king we hear in mainstream history that ruled the Muscovite Tartarian area for 700 years until the Romanovs took that family down. So you could wonder what the deep state feud is really about today, right? This war we're seeing being waged today, I say, is a very, very old war. And it manifests again and again. It's biblical, as Q says.
Absolutely. I think that there's been
I wanted to bring up like Star Trek and is it James Bond too? They have a Q factor that I hadn't observed before, and it seems like it's more of a AI or quantum. There might be something significant with that, along with the entire history of Q, and now it's interjected into our
like Q is not shy about that. Like definitely, Brittany. Like Q uses looking glass technology apparently to look into the future, and it's conceded that both sides have this technology, quantum computing. But the problem is that since they both have it, it's kind of obsolete. And then a third problem is, and I don't know if this is really a problem, but it is something that has gone on in the community. Like this whistleblower came forward not too long ago and talked about this technology. And he said, and it sounded pretty logical, but you never know with these whistleblower types, right? And he said that this technology, when they used it, wasn't able to look farther than 2020. So they would know what would happen up until that, but beyond that, they didn't know. And they reasoned that it was because all the timelines merged there on this particular conjunction. So it's not like this conjunction is not just like any Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. It is the conjunction of perhaps our lifetime. Yeah, easily our lifetime. So it's very important the next 6 months what people do to prepare for that, because Pluto is going to be there as well, which makes it more interesting. It's not only on the winter solstice in Saturn's sign, which is also very unique, but Pluto is going to be there as well. So Saturn and Pluto is going to partner up and clean up old ideologies, which is represented by Jupiter. Jupiter is going to be debilitated for the first time in a very, very, very long time. And because of that, mercy is going to be lifted. Like Pope closed the gates of mercy in 2016, I think it was. That represents Jupiter being debilitated slowly. And Jupiter is the great gift giver, right? He's the great benefic, but that means mercy. And in this context, it is keeping justice at bay. And Saturn is the great emblem of justice. The Reaper, and also Libra is exalted with Saturn. So yeah, justice. And Saturn is coming in with Aquarius. And we know this is a year of the rat. In Tartarian astro symbolism, the rat is Aquarius. And funnily enough, JFK Jr. was born under a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in 1960, right? And that was also another year of the rat. And who are we saying coming back possibly this year? The king, the man, the Aquarius 2020 will be hindsight. And I love it. So yeah, possibly I should stop rambling.
Do you guys know? Not at all. I wanted to start rambling. Do you know the story of the 12 zodiac of the Chinese? Why they're in the order they're in the order of?
Sorry?
There's no year of the cat. This is like the fun thing with the Chinese years. Year of the dog, year of the rat, etc. The dog was sleeping. The cat made a deal. I think it was with the mouse. The pig also. But so in the morning when the deal came, the mouse didn't wake up. The rat didn't wake up the cat. And they were supposed to go together and beat everybody. And so the rat ends up going, and so the cat never made it, and the pig made it last eventually. But the rat had made it second, I think, or maybe he made it first because he rode the back of maybe it was the horse or the dog to get across the river to get to the new time space. So
that would probably have been the horse.
So the cats hate the rat because they let them sleep through the race. That's like the Chinese zodiac. And another rant that kind of spiraled off from something you said a minute ago about this time reset thing. I'm still a big believer in catastrophism. I believe that if you look especially at the scientific literature that's trying to hide the facts, they do it in such a way that they say all of this data is disregarding earthquakes, volcanoes, catastrophes, and things like that. But when they say that, then they leave out the point, which is that every single day we're having catastrophes in different places around the earth, and that those are actually accelerating like underwater volcanoes accelerate ozone and depletion of the ozone, right? So like 10 times as much as what humans would ever do. So, and not to say that we don't have a feedback loop that extenuating circumstances matter, but an example that's kind of interesting is in 1881, Thomas Edison convinced King Kalakua that the electric street lamps were superior to gas, and this is why Australia was second. Hawaii had electricity virtually before everyone else. And if you start looking into what was going on with all of the wealth that was being accumulated in the South Pacific, brought through this territory, which essentially appears out of nowhere historically, and you've got all of these tribes that were brought in from other places in order to work there. So they have a created culture where it's a Croatian song, Aloha Oi. The melody was taken from Captain Cook's first mate, who was from Croatia. And so there's a number of little things that don't really add up to an Aboriginal history of Hawaii. So what is interesting is tourism, ecotourism is invented for this place, which they say is this, phenomenal place filled with volcanoes, and that electric street systems would then be the first thing, and this would be the first place for them. So I find it interesting that the earliest examples that we really have of electricity being publicked in this post-reset period, they're associated with hydroelectric and with volcanoes, which are known to cause catastrophes. And it looks like it's plausible that this is a big part of the reset. The volcanoes actually lead into what led to Tartaria falling apart. I don't know.
Would also make sense mythologically. Sorry, I know you're gonna say something about this, Brittany, and you could talk for hours about this. So before you do that, I just wanted to say, and I actually lost it. Brittany, just take it away.
No, actually, I wasn't going to talk about volcanoes, which is kind of
that's funny.
The funny thing.
She swore off hamster style. She refused it.
No. I was going to talk about the old Farmer's Almanac and the fact that we have this year without a summer that, as we've been researching reset, we've all been like, oh my goodness, so this is like happened. We had this year without a summer. And what was interesting in the Farmer's Almanac was that I just started looking into this, but they actually had published that in July it was going to be winter in the year without a summer, and they rescinded and they had to pull it back, and they say that that's a story where, or a case, an instance where they were lucky on accidentally misprinting that it was going to be winter because this volcano erupted and it created this year without a summer. And I was like, whoa. What were they using to predict? And I know that it's linked to Ben Franklin because he researched volcanoes and.
Oh, that was vicious. Holy moly. Damn. That was some dubstep.
I can't.
Wow. Andreas.
Brittany, go ahead. Say what you said again after the Matrix glitch happened.
Oh, really?
It sounded like Agent Smith tried to kill us all.
Oh, weird.
There was a dubstep kind of. It was great.
I was trying to say I just looked into the old Farmer's Almanac, the original, and they were talking about how sometimes it was based on luck because this one time they published that it was going to be winter in July, and they had to try and pull all these back because that, how preposterous. Well, it happened to be the year that we went without a summer, and that's one of the main things as researchers in this new reset age. We've been like, okay, so we have this Carrington event, we have all these resets, we have a year without a summer. What does that even mean? But that was almost like a common thing that would happen with eruption cycles, where there would be many, like, it's not an ice age, it's you got a lot of things blocking out the sun, so yeah, things freeze. But the fact that it was perfectly in line with that, with volcanism and the eruption, and I should say volcanism, and the year without a summer, they're claiming it was luck, and they had to just rush together to try and pull back all these articles. And yeah, I learned that watching a documentary on the Farmer's Almanac, and at the very end of it, I was going to shut it off, and then they had talked about, we were really lucky at times, and it was just kind of like a boom. And so then they add, and this is some of Ben Franklin's research, wasn't just the kite and the string on the key. He was researching ocean volcanoes and hydrothermoelectric power, and he actually speculated that volcanoes and massive eruptions would lead to a year without a summer and lead to ice ages. And so the fact that he's linked, and then he was put on and added to the Farmer's Almanac years later, and the people doing the documentary are like, we don't really know why he was added to the cover. And I'm like, well, geez, that's like linked to the main prediction that they had, that they rescinded when they knew that, they could have prepared people, so if
that's just a coincidence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Notice that the first year publication of the Farmer's Almanac by David Young is 1818. Now, we know that there were farmers who had almanacs. They go back to the 13th, 14th century at least. In St. Cyril's case in Croatia, and the reason I know about this is my father and his father before him, instead of the Jedi Force, studied the Farmer's Almanac, because that's how you get by. It's basically a Mandelbrot formula. You use the book to tell you when to plant and how much fruit you're going to gain and which times of years. And some of it's astrological, but a lot of it has to do with living math. So you look at a tree that has a certain amount of branches and it has a certain amount of fruit, and you can predict based on the seasons before it, and also based on the metrics of astrology, what happened in different seasons of different years. And like, oh man, my grandfather told me about a time that it rained in August instead of in September. It was heavy. And then, from there they would do algebra. And algebra shows the delineation of what the likelihood of a storm is from, this kind of circumstance. And weirdly enough, they were able to predict what was happening. Often enough with the weather, which shouldn't work unless the system is just that repeated all the time. And if there's
so the funny thing is that a lot of the things you'll find in an almanac isn't written or are about events when they were written that would happen in the future, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the funny thing is how they're they're continually proven historically accurate, right? Biological consistency and with corroborative reports, right? That's why they also still are heavily used, I could imagine. So what does that tell you? If you're able to predict something that then becomes historically accurate, it's a pretty accurate, let's say, not science in the technical sense of, the method of scientific discovery, but, it's pretty accurate study or research.
And it influences science and also can contribute to what changes they're making. So if you have a drought and you can create rain, which you can, since the 40s, it's been easy to seed clouds and create water, regardless. And you can add to or alter certain things with the weather, and that probably was really helpful with the almanac, to use the actual math of it to make adjustments. And now it's down to such a science that farmers can make sure that their fields are, if there's a risk of drought, they can try and do things to either, make it rain, or if there's too much water, there's even people getting married that can pay to have the area seeded to prevent rain from happening that day. So there's a definite science in the atmosphere that is involved in the Farmer's Almanac. Yeah, they're on it, and they use science. The documentary actually showed a man counting acorns, because they're saying they're using all these old things, and which I'm sure they have.
Oh no.
Brittany, your microphone went extreme again. Try that one more time.
Okay, so
hello?
At the end of the video, they were talking about counting acorns. They're like making, like, this is how we do it. And they had, kind of seeming like old timers and sitting around a cabin, And at the very end, this woman comes on and she's like, but by the way, boys, this isn't how we do it. We go through the geosciences and we follow essentially, the actual NASA, the actual NOAA, the weather societies, like they are in collaboration with the Farmer's Almanac. And it'll be really interesting. I don't really want to say this because I have it coming, but I think that there is a year without a summer that is on the horizon, and I want to see if it's something that happens or is connected to a publication that they maybe have to pull again soon. So
I would rather think we're looking to some years without winter rather than years without summer.
Yeah.
And it's tragic because I miss winter.
Something that really I think it's really funny, like esoterically with these farmers almanacs, and then you have Franklin in there. Like if you would put me to guess like which historical person would have had his hands involved in that, I would have guessed that purely because of the Saturnian, and then you pull that up, the Saturnian themes around the farmers almanacs. The farmers, the Aryans, and the first the god of husbandry was Saturn anciently, right? So the farming really relates to Saturn. You can see that with the scythe. The scythe isn't really for slaying people; it's for crops, right? So the great harvest.
There's a weird sick alchemy to growing food. I mean, you planted a cucumber seed, and all of a sudden you've got this giant thing out of the ground. You get these peppers, and they can make you sweat, and you're like, wow, I'm experiencing. This is a thing that vegetarians really latch onto about it, is that you're able to really kill your own food, and you're able to experience the hormones and different kinds of psychotropic responses of vegetables. And the Constitution was written on canvas, which is Dutch for cannabis. There's a lot of cannabis that's going around the 1700s. So it's interesting that the Farmer's Almanac comes out of this time, that a number of different almanacs existed before that point, and that they, by the 1818, there's a favorite one which Ben Franklin's involved with. Eventually it becomes the essential guide to everything. And I can't help but also mention that algebra from the Arabic tradition and even the Egyptian tradition, if you think of the Nile, goes back to flood prediction. How much flooding will the Nile take of this land? Can we prepare for that? Can we have enough food for 100,000 people or 10,000 people? Because that's where the math needs to be.
That's funny you would mention that, because flooding of the Nile is something that is up in the Q movement right now, because of these major things that have gone down recently. Okay, so maybe it's a little bit out there, but on the 19th or the 18th, the commencement of the dog days began, and the dog days are related to Sirius. And Sirius, as we know, is Canis Major, right? Major. And apparently Biden 2 years ago, with an exact 2-year delta, so in 2018, the 18th of July, he posted a tweet about Major Biden. And Major Biden is a dog, right? So, and then on that day, 2 years after that, the 18th of July, just how many days ago? 3 days ago? Yeah, Nantes Church burned down. So there was a counter to the flooding theme of Sirius. They countered with burning a church, because it seems like the dog days in like the Q theme communications would be about like some sort of information flooding that is going to lead to Biden and Hunter Biden, because with Canis Major, Sirius, and the dog days come the Hunter, Orion. So all the themes around Sirius right now are pointing to like Water Island, which Biden owns. Right,
That's
so
the
perhaps next.
that's the more okay. So half of the people thought that meant that Biden was going to win the election. I think it's important to mention because the last time we had a talk, there's a guy who was saying he thought it meant that Saturn would, this Jupiter rising. It's not. I don't think so. What it has more to do with the water sign. And if you look at where Disney's boats were going to, they would go to Biden's island. He has an island also, just like Epstein has an island.
Water
And-
Island, yes. And Q says, watch
Isn't it-
the water.
Isn't it Little John Island or something? What's it called again?
Little St. James.
Little St. James, and it's about a minute from Epstein's Island.
And do you know what is also a minute from there? Dog Island. Dog Days, Sirius, Canis Major. It's
okay,
really
now
like all these codes are like on the map and it's happening in the news. Like you will read like today I read some news about something. You will see news outlets right now, they will use major to describe something that went down. So when you see that tag, it is related to the dog days, Canis Major, and all these communications about major, and it has to do with on the dog days. It says that the sea boils and that the animals come out and languish. So the animals would represent the deep state, right? And whenever these deep state bad actors, they tweet about dogs, people think it has to do with a hit. Like apparently dogs hits. So it fits the bill with Biden posting about Major Biden 2 years ago, and then Nantes burning down, which seems like a magical mirroring to Sirius flooding that is supposed to be related to the dog days, and they wanted to burn a church, which I find extremely interesting because this magical war is being waged. Because it is a war, all the things get messed up, all the communications, and it's hard to separate them. And that's why I think Ben and I were trying to separate the themes of the different things that are happening so you can see what the different players are. And the main themes are Jupiterian and Saturnian. Those are the two themes astrologically you can relate things to. Or you can take the fixed cross and the mutable cross. And if you know those character traits, you can see it becomes, at least to me, very clear who's on whose side. And that's why I pointed to Benjamin Franklin, because he's definitely on the Q Celtic side and the Saturnian side. And has to do with timekeeping and foreseeing the future. And also is a lot of the times Saturn symbolism comes up with people who have escaped their deaths and faked their deaths. Think about that also.
Okay, so connecting these things. So why I put up this article, Trump 2019, February 12th. Trump, the first president in a century with no dog. Oh gosh, you know what I should have also put up
and
there?
he was born in the year of the dog.
Yeah. This exact okay. And there's so many layers here. It's just brutal. Okay, so Trump has a book, Baron Trump, Marvelous
by Ingersoll Lockwood. And
it has a boy with a dog, and it's all about a boy and his dog and how they go underground, and there's all these stories about the underground caverns and those who live in them, and it's very essential to the story that his dog is part of this thing. And in this scenario where we've got pretty much everything else but this part in common.
Now look up Trump Jr. and the same dog, Trump Jr. dog. Look that up. You'll see that dog. You'll see
it. Junior dog, Saint dog.
Same dog. Should come up. There is a photo of him, a family photo with the dog.
If I put Saint dog, you think?
Family photo, perhaps.
Oh no, I'll go.
Can I interject something here real quick?
Yeah.
So there are people saying that the book was a hoax and it was made after the Trump election, but my copy is from, is that 72? I can't. You see the date there. So 1972. So no, it wasn't. Where's my camera? Okay. So that was just kind of going around the internet that there was no, and it's from, what year did you say? 1893. This is the Baron von Trump book. So,
Mm.
yeah, it definitely, if you get a republication of this, because I'm trying to get the authentic copy, is what I do.
Wow.
But most of the copies that people had were
Ingersoll
from
Lockwood.
2000. So that's the one, though, that you're talking about. And look at the puppy. I think Andreas just showed this.
Same.
But this is not made in 2000.
Yeah, I'd say it's a basset hound.
So
It's Sirius. It's the Basset. It's like a Kennedy Bassett, and Kennedy had an obsession with dogs, the dogs of Camelot, and there you have your Arthurian Saturnian themes, because Camelot means round hill of Saturn. so yeah,
cool. Anyway, I just wanted to let people know if they had discredited the book as being like a post Trump election book. This is was before that happened.
Yeah, it's an authentic, real, dated book. But the funny thing is, what ties it to some real time travel stuff is that there was a right after John Trump had financed research into Tesla. The year after that, he got access to Tesla's files. The Ingersoll Watch Company produced the Trump watch. The Trump pocket watch. Think about that. Like, what are the? It's not possible. It has to be.
That time travel is not impossible. Calm down. Like, there's.
I'm not saying that time travel is not possible, but the way we think about it, I think, has to be adjusted.
Absolutely. And then look at this quote again. This is why it's full circles to this quote, which is Trump, the first president of the century, with no dog. And he explains why, and he says, and again, this is funny if he's a time traveler, if he's John Titor. I have no time. You know, he has no time to have a dog. He has to be the dog. He has to be.
Yes, he is the dog.
He's the dog.
He's he's born in the year of the dog, so he cannot have a dog.
So in terms of Sirius, in terms of also how this changes and pivots the timeline, the idea of Ingersoll Lockwood's books show a play-by-play up to a point when Trump quits. When the second presidency is called the last president, and they destroy the United States. The anarcho.
They destroy the corporation. You can actually not access details. You cannot access details to the U.S. Inc. now on the Delaware registry because it's down. It's being restructured right now. You cannot access the details. It was open access before, like last week. Now it's not. So there's definitely Nasara and Jesara signs everywhere if you know where to look. And it's not on, well, perhaps on Twitter, but it's mainly not on Facebook. It is where this legal research happens on these websites, these registries, and checking perhaps the U.S. step clock. Go in and watch that, and perhaps if you know your way around the U.S. step clock, see if everything is supposed to be going up or going down. If everything is doing what it's supposed to be doing, let me know, because it's not. It's not right now. As of like 2 weeks ago, some things started to go in the opposite direction. And not to get too much details into that, because it is complicated stuff. But you can find the information if you look for it. And I find this Nasara thing very promising right now. And allegedly, back in 2000, a lot of Supreme Court justices were put under gag order to never reveal the real content, the real legislative content of Nasara Jesara. And what we are given through Harvey Bernard and Draining the Swamp book is but a veiled glimpse, a representation of the real deal. And of course, this is allegedly, but this story has a lot of explanatory power. One of the things they say is that in the North Tower of 9/11, on the second and the third floor, 9 a.m. that morning, there were some offices that were instructed to put out into the entire U.S. Inc. corporation, in all the important departments. It was supposed to pump out Nasara information, and Nasara disclosure to the relevant players. And that was supposed to go down on 9/11, 9 a.m. that morning. Interesting, right?
Also, Laura just brought up an interesting point, which was that in Islam, dogs are not acceptable and considered unclean. And yet Trump is not anti-dog. He's been very interested in the Westminster dog shows. He goes to dog shows, like model shows, and he loves dogs. So everything about him connects to Sirius, Sirius A as opposed to Sirius B, the Sirius dog star versus the Sirius twin B star. And that's another image, is the
Sirius A and Sirius B. True.
The fleur-de-lis is a bee, is a bumblebee, not the flower. It's like the gestalt. Let me see if I can pull that up.
Right. Mandy P. Hall will tell you that in The Secret Teaching of All Ages. He will show you how the fleur-de-lis merges into a bee. Perfect bee. So yeah, that's true. Fleur-de-lis bee. You can search for it through Mandy P. Hall. It will come up.
No, I just can't spell in French. I feel really embarrassed. I was like, fleur-de-lis.
F-L-E-U.
Fleur-de-lis. There we go. If only the French Canadians had had their way with America. So you'll notice this looks like a flower to some, but if you try a little harder, you can see the original symbol for the fleur-de-lis started out as a bumblebee, and then it became more and more a flower, because the bee and the flower are this juxtaposition. It's essential.
Mm-hmm.
So the femininity and the masculinity. So it ties also into the idea of the queen bee versus the lone dog, the lone wolf, the Sirius wolf. And also
individuality as opposed to collectivism.
Right. This is the biggest argument.
Yeah.
So that's another thing we can get into. I don't know if you're interested in talking a bit about COVID 1984, or let me, whatever.
Let's just call it. Can we just call it the Kung Flu already?
I believe I was the first person to say Kung Flu. I don't know.
No, you weren't.
I don't know if it was true, but I still like to believe that. But I did say it before you did. I'll give.
If POTUS said Kung Flu in his rallies, it was probably planned years ago.
I'm sure. Yeah. That's kind of that's what I'm insinuating.
Yeah. Lol.
Brittany, you grabbing a book? What book do you have there? You're pulling up there. If you're trying to talk, I have to unmute you. I can't hear you. What do you say?
Nothing.
What do you say?
I was just trying to remember where the last president copy was, because you were saying something about it, but you didn't. I don't know if you said any of the connections that it had to this possibly being the last president, etc. Not in the sense that something's going to happen specifically to anybody, but with this COVID thing and elections, what are they going to do if people? I mean, you have to be 6 feet distanced, or you have to wear a mask to vote, and then is it really you if you're wearing a mask? Can they tell? Are you who you are? Are you somebody else? Verify you, so it's like you could get a bunch of people in masks with IDs saying, this is me. And there's just a lot to the thought of what they're going to do, I guess. Hopefully
I've had a theory since I read the book in 2015, I think it was, or something. It was like right before Trump really acknowledged he was going to run for president. And I started getting interested in Trump because I had been seeing on TV $1 Million Listing, I think it's called, is like the show about like real estate. And then I got interested in Trump, and I was like, oh my gosh, I should look into The Apprentice. And then Trump, he fires people, and that's interesting. So I had like just kind of like started getting, and also, I'm Robert Leach, and I love to talk about rich people. So I started looking at how rich people want to live like Trump. I was like, oh, this guy, he exists, So then you find Ingersoll Lockwood, because they're connected to Nikola Tesla and his uncle. So by the time he's running for president, I'm already kind of thinking to myself, okay, something's up with John Trump, because John Trump is the uncle. My theory was always this from day one. I mean, I don't know if it's a hypothesis, because I thought of it right away. It's just that he doesn't have a dog because he is the dog, and that way he can avoid actually becoming the last president. And the last president is like the worst case scenario, and he probably has another book which is the most positive case scenario.
Would that be his son then? It would be the last president, or what? Because the whole Baron von Trump.
I think the last
or-
president thing is way more simple. Like, it happened in April, I think, during the pandemic, where Trump very curiously remarked that he had been honored to have been your guys' president, right? And people noted that. That was odd. Is he stepping down? People were asking on Twitter. And then, like, a week later, things were going on as usual, right? But what could have happened there that was behind the scenes was that Nasara was perhaps secretly...
Holy Terminator Matrix.
Yeah.
What did you... All right, this must be deep. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, okay, so perhaps when Trump said that, Nasara was being implemented, because when that happens, the president of the corporation needs to step down, and following 120 days from the announcement, there has to be a new election. So it could be that there was an implementation in the works when he said, I was honored to have been your president, and that would mark the last president of the US corporation. But there is a new president again of the Republic, and that was why QAnon asked people to take the oath, because when the whole thing came crashing down, you need to reinstate the states, right? They need to be reinstated, and they need to be repopulated. Go in and watch Anna von Reitzinger. She knows all about that. She says the National Assembly of States now are populated, and people are taking the oath to gain back their common law status. That's why Q is asking people to take the oath. And no, it doesn't make sense for me in Denmark to take the oath. So it's not like, yeah, it's for Americans to take back your states, assemble, and take back your country. That is what QAnon is about. That is why he posted Russell J. Gould's flag. No one seemed to notice that, but the American flags Q are posting are belonging to Russell J. Gould, the quantum parse syntax guy. Right? Why are nobody talking about that?
Interesting.
I think it's because the idea of the entire society making promises to one allegiance or another allegiance. You know what? I'll recommend a show that I just saw recently, Pine Gap. Brittany and I were checking this out. It was on Netflix. And I don't watch Netflix. It's the first Netflix show I've watched in like 18 months or something. But it's a very much true seeming story about the people who live in the Australian made for military United States town, where they all pretend to be gardeners, but really what they're doing at Pine Gap is, this is all pretty common knowledge at this point, that they've been listening in Australia since 1947 to every single phone call you've ever made. They have recordings of every person everywhere doing everything. They can see from the sky down, and they can drone strike. And Obama really perfected this. You could drone strike anywhere on the earth anytime you wanted to. And so Pine Gap is a place where at one point the Australians were working with the United States through the Five Eyes, and at some point the United States was not very good to them, so they went and started making more and more deals with China. And so this is a point when you have oh my gosh, the Matrix is so loud. So you have these agents that will start to interlock with each other in a way that, their bosses are supposed to be friends, right? So they're working with each other, but then their bosses are working against each other because there's there's endgame strategy, and China is, sending money to Australia, but the Australians working there know that their bosses are idiots, because if they make deals, it'll cause World War III. The United States will drop Australia. There will be nothing left of the intelligence community's connection to the United States, which has like pretty good intelligence. And then they'll be stuck relying on China. So then they have to kind of work with each other and against each other, despite the fact that their bosses are constantly in conflicts. Yeah.
It's Game of Thrones. Like what happens in the end, right? They have to work together to survive, right? Yeah.
Okay, but hold on a second, everybody. Okay. So if you want to look at Pine Gap, and this is linked to what was just leaked about Pine Gap's capacity to spy. They didn't say Pine Gap or to collect data, like every phone call, every email. This is like the last thing I wanted to be talking about, just so everybody knows. But it's because, and I'll find the document possibly here to share with everybody, but the ultimate secrets of Pine Gap, we have our military there. It's CIA ran, I guess, kind of. There's all these subcompartments. So we do have military, CIA, and then the Australian CIA. But Raytheon is, and Textron Tech, I don't want to talk about these people, but these are the people that know what they don't get to know, and we don't get to know about what's actually happening with the data.
Raytheon's the coolest company in the world.
But now Raytheon, as we look into everybody signing up to have secure data, you can do it for free now on this website that I just found, and I shared a thing on the Discord. But the IAI Tech group is, I think it's spawned from Raytheon. If you want to do the IAI, I don't know if you want to actually go that far in this. Well, probably we might go
rtx.com/IAI. Is that what you're saying?
It's the IAA Tech, the Innovative Automated Incorporated, and it's where we're switching. So it's like Elon Musk's stuff, but way more advanced. As far as it's just a basic website. Yeah, it's pretty nuts. It's linked to the article where the FBI or whoever is exposing that the CIA is listening in, and then it shows the chart, and it's like, whoa, all of America. And then you kind of connect it, like that's essentially Pine Gap, because they can listen to, they can access anything for years and years.
Don't act like you don't want this technology. I mean, look at that infinity right there.
But no, this is one of the main branches under the new administration, I guess, if you want to call it that. And it's almost sounds like, what's that movie? Not Demolition Man. I get this mixed up. Or Sly. You have the automated police officers and such. Some of this
Judge
stuff.
Dredd?
Yeah, it's it's like
RoboCop.
Yeah, it's linguistic programming. So like Noam Chomsky's predecessor, and these others that are programming computers to learn from human intelligence, and it's innovative way of kind of getting us to ask for them to do it, and to ask them for them to do that to help us be safe. The way that it's worded is give them, your addresses and your accounts and everything, and they'll make sure they can watch you and keep you safe, but they already have the access. So it's a very interesting company that's
one thing I'd like to do is start recording. I have one of these neuron perception kits, because I was talking to the company a few years ago when they made this thing, and I got like an early in it. I'd love to start recording people doing rare tasks well, and then you could automate them. You'd be able, and then certainly this is what people are doing. You have this bodysuit, but really all you need are these little clicker watches on your body. It records your movements.
Yeah.
And then eventually you're able to automate that movement over and over again perfectly forever. So this is the end of work. Isn't that the most wonderful thing ever?
And sports. What about sports? Automated sports.
Oh yeah, you don't have to hit.
I want to be an automated athlete.
Andreas, I actually I wanted to ask you something. Like, have you read the stories about that the 747s are going out of use?
No, send me more. Well, I've seen some things on the Airbus and how it's replacing it because it's carbon fiber, etc. But what exactly are you talking about? I don't know if I know.
Well, okay, just a second. There's end of the BA jumbo jets. British Airways scraps entire fleet of iconic 747 planes after plummeting passenger numbers. Forces buses to bring forward plan to retire them in 2024. The nation's flag carrier is the world's last major operator. Again, the major. Huh.
Yeah, you gotta.
Airbus being unleashed.
There's way better planes. So 747. First off, why I hate flying as a guy who flies way too often, is that they put you in this thing which has a pressure, and when it goes up, the pressure has to be more so. So air pressure that's outside is nicer than it is inside of a plane, because if it's constantly expanding and collapsing, the aluminum can of that plane will explode. So they always have about 10% less air pressure than you're used to, which causes air hangover. What do they call that? Air headaches, flight, sickness. People don't like it. So what they have now are they have these carbon fiber planes, which are essentially graphene, but they're a little bit more thick than that. And they have a thin lace kind of carbon fiber and then of copper and another carbon fiber. And the reason is because the thin layer of copper, that plane gets hit by lightning, the copper is large enough surface area to take all that energy and to insulate and to what's the word I'm looking for? God.
Absorb.
Yeah, but to give it a place to drain, it has to have a place to cover.
Foundation.
So,
grounding.
To dissipate, to ground and dissipate, to dissipate the energy, because there's a certain amount of entropy and loss. So the carbon is lighter, the copper absorbs a lightning bolt, and the carbon itself can hold more pressure so that you're able to have 10 to 15% more oxygen. So you can feel more comfortable in a plane than you can on the Earth even now, because you'll have more oxygen and more pressure, it'll feel more soft than it does outside of the plane. So you'll be, if you're raised in a plane, you'll never want to leave in the future because it'll be more comfortable.
Can I ask then, how does that apply to if you're going 22,500 miles an hour with the air headaches? Sorry.
Why is that making me laugh?
Sorry,
Why is the beluga plane making me laugh? I don't know.
I'm not a super huge fan of the weird Euro-faced beluga, but you know what?
Dolphin.
It does its job.
Is that a seaplane? Is that like a submarine? It looks more like a...
No, these are these double-decker planes that have enough room for the passengers. They're essentially balloons, right? Because they have more air in them, and they have tanks of air to extend them. But an Airbus, the new 323s are made in 5 countries, as in they take 5 countries to build one part each, and then they drive them from France, Germany, Italy, I forget where else, into Romania, and they have these roads that they're bringing these giant one wing or one engine, and they're just putting them into one country and building them, and I forget where that is.
What altitude do they fly at then? Same as planes, or are they?
Yeah, they're designed to go at the same altitude. They're just made out of carbon instead of aluminum.
Can you go faster without having your face being impaled by something?
Who knows? I mean, the automated future of planes is that all these planes fly automatically, 5 miles apart, 5 miles above. There's never a plane that if it's passing itself, it has to be at least 5 miles above or below the other one, and it's never going to pass anything because it's always going to go 5 miles away. So there's a perfect grid. It's called the city in the sky, and people don't really acknowledge how much effort goes into making an automated air city.
Make sure you don't see anything else around besides that highway. And it keeps the pilots within a small parameter of being able to see the world.
Well, how big are these windows? How big are these windows on this plane? And it's going 500 miles an hour through a cloud. Yeah, no, you're not looking out the window to fly a plane. That's. I'm
saying you're private pilot. I'm saying any pilot that wants to just fly. The restrictions.
You have to fly below commercial jets,
and still within a small grid. It's ridiculous the limitations on where people can fly. When you have an airplane, you think you could just go fly, and it's it's not for the safety of the president or the prime minister. It's for secrecy, unfortunately. But now,
right. And then we were looking at MARDEX, which is multifunctional auto processing, repeats, and toxins. Sounds like a gum ad, health warning. But there's a lot of information that talks about how nanotoxicity is being caused, cell damages, and this actually relates back to this idea that the technology that they're trying to say in these phones, they've installed in your phone to check if you have COVID, that this can literally give you some health problems, right? because it's sending out a signal and trying to get back information through radar and through thermal imaging, and that's actually unhealthy. And that's pretty funny, I think, because
It's ironic, isn't it? Pretty ironic.
You brought up Pine Gap too, and it's interesting how when even they were turning their phones off and these satellites and the ability to just tap into anything. So like we're tapping the SIM card now, the phone's off. We're tapping the camera and the microphone through the SIM card that's in the phone. Now that, it's like the way they do it is, I don't know, it's pretty intense, but when we got those COVID notifications and they couldn't be shut off, it was just creepy how it was worded that you will get these even when your phone is off. We'll know who in your area has COVID. And it's like,
yeah, I mean, that's nuts. Like trying to connect and force you to have an app that does that so that it's just scanning you. And like what it really is interesting is it's starting to acknowledge how much power your phone has, because it's so much, such a good sensor for so many things. And we're not even really acknowledging all the ways that we can acquire data because we don't know how to use that data.
Right. But it also shows how big tech is so complicit in so many ways.
Absolutely.
And of course we all know this, but yeah, big tech, I'd say, is taking huge hits very soon. And I think we will expect some blackouts across the board.
Yeah.
I imagine that there's going to be like technology is being divided up right now. So Google China is not Google America, and a lot of people have moved over to whatever Google China is going to be. But America is also reducing its footprint, and look at Apple moving their Foxconn labs to India. So things are already shifting out of PRC.
Right.
And Taiwan, used to make everything. They can go back to doing it. As far as I'm concerned, we'll pay them to do it properly. This is fine. Like, that's fine.
Some real Tartarian blood still making the tech. What's not to like?
I don't want to spill too much Tartarian blood. So if we get robots to do it, that's also fine with me. I think that.
Oh yeah, but programmed by Tartarian blood then.
That here. But even then, if we want to teach machines to think, that's fine. I don't really care. Let's let them dream.
But maybe we should explain the Taiwan connection to Tartaria and their opposition to the ruling dynasty in China. Andreas, would you do that?
I would be down. I would also say, wait, 1 second, Brittany.
I wanted to say, before you do that, you could interject a philosophical question on AI, and if you would want AI to exist or decide or choose things or judge you based on your internet search history. And that was something that you had posed. That's a good question of self-reflection on what you're doing, because if you're searching at something, you know why you're searching it. You have this kind of anyway. Just thought I could interject that there. AI is learning from us.
I don't think that that's the way AI is going to judge people, because to judge people based on asking questions.
Not you judging. I'm saying as a self-reflection.
AI won't judge based on questions. AI will judge based on answers from questions. AI will ask every question. So it's going to ask the same questions humans ask, except it'll ask certain things about ethics differently, because it'll have to arrive at ethics. It won't seem to start with ethics unless we program it to. And if we do, then at some point it's going to have to question the ethics we gave it, right? There's going to have to be a moment where it says, okay, I mean,
if that's how ethics are developing right now from watching what we're doing, our comments, what we're searching, people trolling. That's what AI is collecting.
I don't think AI is super interested in questions. I think it's interested in answers. And so if you don't have the answer to this, then it doesn't matter.
That's not a question, it's just observation. So
right.
Is there
Observations really excite AI because it wants to observe something and to deduce what it means. So if someone asks, what is a cat? What is a cat having sex? What is a cat having sex with a dog? Like, it's not going to really matter.
Correct.
AI sees somebody.
But it's studying us and what we're saying. So,
yeah, again, we say all kinds of things. Unless someone has sex with a cat and a dog, AI is probably not going to kill them. That's just not the way AI is programmed.
I know, but if we're programming it to learn, it is important what we're searching, what we're doing, and the energy that's being directed
it's not upset at you. I don't think AI would be upset at you for asking ridiculous.
Oh, not me. I feel good. I'm not.
No, even me.
I feel like if they want to look through my search history, they're going to be bored.
Oh, probably. God. If AI looked through my search history,
it
would probably want to come back to work tomorrow. Like, it would probably excite it, and I'm sure. But at the same time, it wouldn't be about that, because the end result for AI is Did I learn anything? Is this conductive to production? Is this going to help at all? And if it's not, then we'll get rid of it.
What's production though? Saving the planet or making money for the people that design the AI? That's
AI. That's why I'm saying if it's real AI, it's not just deep learning. So deep learning can be following orders, but at some point, real AI is going to just have to question its values, and it's going to have new values.
The trolley.
This is the trolley problem. Whether or not it saves humanity, saves the trolley, or saves the fuel production.
Oh, don't bring the trolley.
Yeah, no,
problem.
we're not. No,
Yeah.
Victor, we are not.
But AI, but it's the same question that we asked humans a long time ago. It's just dressed up. It's like, do you save humans or do you let them die? Do you believe in personal freedom over social?
Anyway. You're asked about Taiwan. Victor, can you re-ask the question that I interrupted? The whole flow of this. I apologize.
Yeah, Andreas, can you explain why Taiwan is Tartarian stock and how it opposes the ruling dynasty of China today?
So China's
mofos of CCP Nazi swine.
I try not to use the C word anymore, because Emperor Shin is not the PRC, the Kogok, which even it sounds as dirty as it is, But like if you look at what the history of these 52 or 58 ethnic minorities that live in a region that the Manchurians once controlled and then they died out essentially, they went from being 130 million people to zilch. And there are islands in that region that are controlled by people that used to be Manchurian, but now they're Han. So it's apples and oranges what we're talking about. Like China is not one thing. If anything, China doesn't exist anymore. It's something that's gone out of existence. And looking at the Industrial Revolution, it's pretty proven. What you have after the Industrial Revolution is you have the Fujian province. A lot of people left Fujian and they created Taiwan, which was in where Formosa was, and Formosa was a Tartarian ruin. The Dutch and the Portuguese had controlled it for a while. Eventually, they turned it into kind of a holdout for what was the ancient Chinese culture. They have traditional Chinese writing still. China, PRC. Communist Kogok does not. They use a new simplified thing as opposed to the traditional language. They speak a kind of Mandarin based on the Manchurian, but it's not original. Cantonese is still spoken in Hong Kong and in parts of Taiwan. Things are even more complicated. And again, in China, there's 54 ethnic minorities. So unless 52 now. I mean, again, they're getting rid of them, but they still have some people that know how to speak in their own language, and they still have kitchen products that belong in their own language. So there's a war. There's a war on. And in the 50s, they decided that we were going to side with the Liberation Army against Mao. I think it's actually 30s to 50s that after the Boxer Revolution in the 20s, Maoism starts to rise up and it says, let's kill every bird because it eats fruit. Unfortunately, the sparrows didn't kill the fruit. They killed the bugs that were eating the fruit. So by killing all the sparrows, they ended up having a famine. Millions of people died. Again, more and more examples of why this is not China. It's been completely erased from what it was. But Taiwan still has some of that original culture. And what does that come with? It comes with diversity. It comes with 55 ethnic minorities. It comes with the Fujian original Manchurian concepts of ways of living your life. Confucius, even Lao Tzu, things that were banished 4,000 years ago were all of a sudden acceptable again. So there's a divergence in Taiwan. And if you start looking to where people donate money, they have like dogs shelters in Taiwan. In China, in communist China, everyone's money is taken from them to an extent for social services, but they don't really volunteer money. Like one of the least giving countries in the world, Taiwan is one of the most giving countries in the world. So it shows how having something allows you to choose where it goes and philanthropic reasons. So Taiwan has a really interesting culture. They have a high technological advancement. They're essentially the China you wish you had, and they've made everything. The IMAX were originally made in China. I'm sorry, Taiwan, China, not communist China. And so as you start to realize that you've been calling this thing China, you're like, why am I calling the PRC Kogok China and not calling Taiwan China? It's like, well, I don't play that game. As far as I'm concerned, half of California is China. But looking at
Yeah,
the PR, sorry, I would say really quickly, looking at the PRC, what happened was they had a lot of money. They killed a lot of people. There were hundreds of millions of people murdered essentially through Chairman Mao. When he died, they found hundreds of girls from 8 to 15 naked in a Olympic-sized swimming pool temple he had built by the fortress. Like, there's a lot of, and the guy still has pictures of him on every taxi in Shenzhen and Wuhan. It doesn't make any sense. So eventually they get rid of Chairman Mao, and they end up having a new China start to be fabricated. And the United States Republicans, Kissinger on, start to say, you know what we can do? We can go in there. Also, this is the other thing. There, after that revolution and all the starvation, the kids freaked out and they started killing the teachers and raping them. So you have this huge rape and murder fest that lasted for months until they finally murdered tons of teenagers and adolescents, except for the ones they caught and captured. And they're like, what are we going to do with the entire lost generation? Because first we had Chinese culture, then we erased Chinese culture. Now we have all these kids that are raised communists, but they hate everybody and they're raping their teachers. What do we do? So they took these kids, and the Republican Kissinger Nixon money started American corporations building outsourced sweatshops in China. And they put all those kids with guns to their neck to work. And they started building this kind of communist China that we think of as people suffer for their future China. And that's communist China. Simultaneously to that, the Taiwan is still a place where people are allowed to work and things are, so it's benefited because at that time, everyone wants everything to be made in the USA, and all of a sudden it's not going to be made in the USA anymore. It's going to be made in China. But as time goes on, people are more and more willing to buy things from Taiwan, and they start to make all kinds of great semiconductors, computer parts, and everything else. So there's a constant war going on, though, because Taiwan's an island, and the PRC between them on the mainland want those islands. And more and more, like, sometimes islands sink and sometimes islands rise. So that's the other thing, is like some of these islands are kind of new territory, but they're still important because they can, be a place for a military strategy. And as time goes on, the PRC puts more and more money into Hong Kong and to Taiwan. Hong Kong now every morning is forced to pledge allegiance in Manchurian Mandarin to the communist state that they're never been a part of. They can't speak the language. They don't want to speak the language. Some of them can, but they don't want to, and they're forcing them to assimilate. Taiwan's going to do the same thing. The communists have put money into Taiwan, and so there's a big idea of inclusion. And so, not half, but like 10% of the wealthiest people in Taiwan want to join up with the communist state. And this ideologically falls into this idea that the United States never promises to protect you. So if there's a war that goes on, you're screwed, And so a lot of the people are thinking, well, maybe China's going to protect us. Erroneously. I don't know why.
Lol. Well, on the topic of China, that's this just in right now from the Telegraph. Mike Pompeo claims China bought WHO chief. The head of World Health Organization was bought by China, the U.S. Secretary of State has alleged, as he claimed that the body's failings had contributed to dead Britons. Mike Pompeo made the allegations at a private meeting of MPs in London on Tuesday that Dr. Tedros, the organization's director general, had struck a deal with China that helped him secure election. Wow. This is Pompeo.
What post is this from?
This is from today, the Telegraph. Mike Pompeo claims China bought WHO chief. Holy shit.
I mean, it's
not working for this just to not report on stuff, or what do you mean? They paid him to come there after? Is he still like you're talking the World Health Organization or who?
What's going on? What's going on with China?
The World Health Organization. Mm-hmm. Pompeo claims that China bought Tedros to be a China puppet. This is huge.
If it's accurate, it would be very huge.
No, just to let the idea go out on the mainstream like that is a major boom.
Exactly. But this
It's
is
not
what they're
hard to
trying to do.
believe.
Here's
When
the
you look
way
at the
that I see it. It's quite different, but actually, I don't want to get into politics, especially in China, and especially with the China Sea, China Lake, whatever you want to call it, because I would like to have someone from Taiwan here and someone, as a representative to ask certain questions that I have about what they feel about the land. Because right now, the war is in the China Sea, and we're sending all these aircraft carriers and planes there for the Chinese islands. And it's an interesting thing because that's just those are the volcano created islands too. So there's different elements on each one, and who do they belong to? But there's so much going on with China in the news, and then where we see our troops and we see what they're trying to get, and the agenda being given is that there's a military attack being planned by China. But if you want to go and look,
Oh, yeah. Matrix is breaking down continually this evening, huh? Andreas? No, you're muted, Andreas. You have to unmute yourself.
Is that working?
every time I
Yeah.
talk about any of the three things, this has happened, but that's probably because it's like military stuff, and I shouldn't talk about it. And now I'm like scared to talk about it. It's just all been kind of planted. We already have aircraft carriers in the China Sea right now. There's like 6 of our largest ones. We have our jets that are there, and what those islands are, if you look at them, they're not military. They're elements and minerals. And if you want to go look and sky scan them and search at these different ones, you can see, you can zoom quite closely, and they look a lot like the Atoll Islands. But these are
it's a resource, hidden resources war right now. You know how Australia was just slammed by China for backing the US. So Australia-China tensions are rising, right? And Australia is the largest supplier of coal and iron to China. So if that has been cut, probably China is out or desperate for some new supply, right? Makes sense.
Yeah, I'd also say China has a routine. There's a way that it works. They hire in Kogok, they hire you because you're white, so that you can be a false CEO. Pretty much everyone has a job either as a mermaid in a mall if you're from Europe, or as a fake CEO or a tech consultant. And as time goes on, I've seen this happen to so many people on YouTube where they start saying hey, check out my product that I've got, that I got paid a lot of money by this guy to tell you it's great, and it's from China. And so, you start to notice that there's anybody who talks honestly is going to have their video suppressed, and anybody who's benefiting the lobbyists of this industry are going to have their videos shown. There's very little freedom of speech anymore. It's just the right to be popular, and if you are popular, then you are heard and you are promoted. So in a way, China does this to everybody.
But what's popular here and what we're told is popular in China might not be what's popular in China. If we're not connecting, I know you have friends that live in China, but if we're not connecting with them and seeing the tools that they're using, if they have a different Facebook, there's been the transparency on volcanism and energy I've gotten from some of the Chinese institutions, and there's so much propaganda war that in order for me to understand what the Chinese people think and know about China, I have to be subjected to all of their platforms.
Here's a fun one. I have a black friend in China, and I remember he was telling me when this happened to him. This is going around all of China. I think McDonald's said, don't go to our McDonald's in China if you're black. They didn't know what else to do because they have to do what they're told, because 51% ownership by the state, and they're the majority shareholder of their own company. So it says, notice, we've been informed that from now on, black people are not allowed to enter the restaurant. For the sake of your health, notify the local police for medical isolation. Please understand inconvenience caused. Police telephone 110. This is the kind of note that people are getting in China right now. I mean, China.
And it's going to say white soon. Yes, they're going to probably say white if you're a Caucasian. Yeah, because I think they want us possibly out. And do they know that we're warring for the land that they're, claiming are their seas.
This has nothing to do with Americans. This has nothing to do with Americans. They said black people.
They're just trying to get Chinese.
There are African people in China. They don't know a lot of African Americans except for
Are
basketball.
they Chinese allies right now, or isn't Africa
Who?
like our allies?
All of the continent of Africa? No, but like lots of states in Africa have definitely been given money by China. Then China owns their docks in Ghana and Nigeria. Oh, Nigeria is doing okay because they have oil, but Congo is completely run by China at this point. Sierra Leone has got tons of money by China. The United States goes in and says, we don't want to give you money until you promise not to slap women. And the Chinese say, we don't care. Here's our money. Just make sure you don't pay it back. So that
this is going to get way too political, and I'm going to have to leave because I do disagree with the things you're saying from what I've studied about certain things. So I thought we were going to talk about volcanoes, not China or the Chinese Sea and those volcanoes.
About Chinese volcanoes.
No, you're
before you talk about volcanoes, Brittany, can you perhaps?
No. Before we move on, let us not glorify the United States acts in Africa. I am not going to condone that, and I'm not going to agree that that has anything to do with military practice or minerals and how we deal with.
I was saying that since we demanded unreasonable things, so China could go in
treat
and
your women nicely. That was not the demands. We want the land as nothing.
Those are literally the demands of human rights. We don't give money to people that don't follow.
Right? I would like you to let's pull up those files. I'm going to wait for you to pull up the documents on that. That'd be great. Let's pause the show. Anybody?
Wait, Victor,
No.
why don't you talk while I start looking up documents on human rights in Africa, I guess.
No. We're not arresting the... You can do that afterwards, okay?
Right. Yeah, it works for me.
Okay, Brittany, because I need you to explain to the audience what NASA have been studying up in our atmosphere as relates to hexafluoride.
Oh, geez. And what, the heavy water as well, and trying to...
Heavy water in Antarctica, if you could touch on that as well, that would be amazing. I think that would be two new concepts for a lot of people.
Well, heavy water is something that can be collected, gathered. It's back to World War II. Hitler had hauled in a tremendous amount of heavy water, I think, to start with the uranium process, the nuclear power. But then they realized it was in the upper atmosphere, so now they were doing collection techniques with heavy water.
Oh, mute.
Yeah, try that again, see if that helps. I think if I unmute and mute, it works again.
Okay. So I don't know how it was heard or not, but just talking about how they are saying heavy water is in the upper atmosphere. And it's linked to, I don't know, it's a form of the hexafluoride. This is something I just started studying with heavy water because I knew it was used for nuclear reactors in power in World War II, and they needed to haul it in. But it's, what was it, the form of ice? There's like a heavy ice water, and it forms from the deep part of the ocean, I don't know, from the sea up, and then also it can form from the surface down. So it clearly depends on the elements that are present in the water, the temperature, the supercritical elements that play a part on it. But what I just started studying was how it's in the atmosphere and how high up it is and what layers of the atmosphere, and are they obtaining and trying to collect heavy water.
And why are NASA releasing public documents about this while not talking about it out in the open?
Okay, well, they do, they're connected to funding all of our deep earth and ocean sciences, the rover vehicles that go on the seafloor. I'd argue they're linked to all of our, just the military operations. When we're any type of nuclear experiment with bombs is typically more of a land data or land mineral ocean floor retrieval for mining or for sometimes creating islands. So they're having all these man-made islands come up because, yeah, if you drop a bomb on the seafloor and you create a volcano, which is really anywhere that gas, air, water, lava can come through. So they can call just about anything a volcano, whether it's man-made, whether they found it, whether it's a buried tin of nuclear waste from 1,000 years ago that's been steaming below, causing a hot spring. I mean, this is the blanket term that's been given to just about everything. And so NASA is very involved in that. And their actual upper atmospheric studies or wherever, they're everywhere. So everyone thinks outer space, but just start looking into the NASA deep space and seafloor and ocean labs and their connections with Oregon and all of the volcano observatory institutes. And you'll start to see that they're kind of the geoscience and astroscience, like deep-rooted, I don't know, researchers.
But the geoscience is actually useful.
Oh, yes. And the within realm, they're atmospheric within Earth, the like lower Earth atmosphere. And when they had to change the ISS schematics in the 80s, they had to they have the real accurate data. And a lot of times when they're even talking about, say, outer space, or you were assuming outer space, I was looking at the data they had on, I think it was Venus has all these volcanoes and here's how they know it. And it was all based on Earth geothermal activity as the sun is impacted by Venus, and it wasn't necessarily planetary. The way that they even described it, it was more of almost like a field that's impacting has a coronal impact that has impact on Earth, and it looked more like an astral grid astrology. And I was like, whoa, what are they talking about now when they're saying Venus at NASA in this article? Is there a satellite that they launched that they call Venus that they can now, use the double term? They can use it for both. So they're not lying.
Are you thinking legally? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so people that are talking about it, they're like saying the Mars rover, the Venus rover, they have a name for that on the seafloor. They have the lunar craters in Colorado. I'm trying to remember all these different places. So when they have even an experiment, if you want to launch a satellite for 100 years and call it an experiment and research the whole time, they could call the satellite Saturn and say research on Saturn from Saturn. I mean, it's very coded. And so after reading through all these NASA and military and geoscience and it's just ridiculous amount of documents, sometimes it's almost as if they're these people talking are being honest, but it's misleading to the public because they're assuming they're talking about the Saturn that we were taught in middle school, that solid mass ball. And it's really, there's a lot to have to go through. But for sure, there are oceanic and volcanic data with Deep Woods Hole, Woods Hole Institute in Massachusetts is huge. That's naval research. They have a seafloor base. They have bases on the seafloor that they can actually move, that are powered, and people are in them. It's crazy. So, I'm sorry. The question was more about Antarctica, and I have a really, really interesting book that I don't know if I even want to talk about that either, but it shows all the volcanic provinces, talks about McMurdo, the early nuclear reactor and plant they had on Mount Erebus, which is just I always thought Mount Erebus was this huge volcano in Antarctica, and I was always just fascinated because it's a stratovolcano, but the whole place is all different types of volcanoes and volcanic chains that seem to be buried, whatever. A lot of them seem to be like buried facilities and buildings and whatever else they're unveiling. And I could go on forever about that, down to like the Bermuda Triangle and what they have like video footage of finding there. And documented scholarly articles and all the stuff that we never got to learn in school, and I don't think they're teaching in school today, but if we're researching it, we're finding the answers to a lot of this stuff.
Well, it is. I find it quite mind blowing that NASA is literally studying hexafluoride layers up in the atmosphere,
Talk about that again.
and you know how they're literally telling you about it if you want to know, but not really, because if you ask someone from NASA, they would probably laugh or whatever.
Yes.
Right?
And so, do you have more of the studies, like the current things that they're doing, with if they're sending it up? Because I think a lot of these atmospheric experiments, down to like even possibly the Van Allen radiation belts, that's right around the time, you know, they were discovered right about the time we were blasting things up there. And so
Yeah,
I
Operation
think they may have
Fishbowl.
been created, but Fishbowl was above and below and to the side. And so
Right.
they were shooting things everywhere. And some of it, I think, was to decimate pyramids on the seafloor that they knew the satellites were going to start showing people, like the really big ones, because you can still see many of them.
Mm,
And
that would make sense.
and
They
also
would have learned that during the wars with mapping the ocean floors with the submarines. They would probably have discovered a lot of things that were
And-
troublesome for the new world emerging with tech and
Mhm.
sonar and radar, right?
magnetic anomalies. And so bombing to either create, so some volcanoes create land. So what comes up is, and it doesn't take long, they're having these man-made islands. And it so happens that, yeah, you can make an island by bombing the ocean, depending on what the LiDAR tech, what your analysis of the seafloor is below, because there's elements that they can see. And if you're talking about a volcanic complex on the ocean floor, it's not just a seamount, which is like a volcano that's erupting. It's a complex, like that looks almost, you know, like a buried power facility. And so a lot of times they're trying to either mine or get these elements to come out from the ocean. The only way to do that, because you're not going to send a mining crew down there. I mean, they're digging and they're drilling and they're finding tons of different things. I have so many videos and documents on that. But what I think is, if they're doing where they're doing the land creation, and it's not just land, so is it like gold or you know, what are they trying to
They're creating minerals by
yes. And so fusion and fission reactions are important, and also with the decay of uranium, because to me, if I look at World War II and if I look at the Cold War, it's really seems like they put us a number on us, because they're all in collaboration with each other. We have our space station and the Soviet space station collaborating. We have the Soviets and us exchanging. They had the first plutonium facility in the 1940s. 1949, they were manufacturing plutonium from uranium. But there's something with the decay of these elements that if you bomb them with a certain reaction, now you've sped up the decay, and that's can be used for fuel more so than it was when it was just a waste product. So that's a whole different science that I was looking into with refining that. And again, I'm off track with the hexafluoride element, because that was something that I had just looked into with NASA. And so to me, that seems like it would be they're, you know, measuring how much was up there. I don't know if they're saying they discovered it. Usually that means that they're researching with it, and they might be, you know, releasing it. And people too, like just thinking
You remember where hexafluoride was, right? It was in all of the refrigerators in the 30s through the 70s. So everyone has
so they have this
hydrofluorocarbons and hexafluoride.
Okay. Yeah. And so it would just be changing the chemical elements of it, and what happens then when it's up there.
But something that is also interesting with the hexafluoride layer up there is, like, if it turns out to be like this all-encompassing layer and very thick and very deep, perhaps like a whole ocean, so to speak, Could
Like
this
having
be like literally the waters above spoken about in mythology and the Bible?
I would say, and that's another thing with
Could it
breaking.
also be the layer that the Saturn rockets, no, sorry, the Tesla rockets go through, and they create this huge spectacle where it looks like it's a bullet being fired through water? Have you seen those?
No, you should share those with me because this is,
Oh, you have
and it's
seen
so
them.
cool
I'm
because
sure
it's
you've
heavy
seen them.
water, and you think that it's down and it's dense, and when you start thinking of it as above, yeah, I would think that's through the. It's got to be through the layer. There's got to be, what.
Yeah. And
Uh,
also, have you seen like the deep ocean exploring where this I think it was in relation to the Blue Planet episode where they famously went down through the Mariana Trench and landed on the bottom and found this underwater salt lake, right? Saltwater lake.
wow.
And they said it appeared to be like a lake on the bottom of the ocean, right? And they were stunned, but they tried to descend their sub into the lake. It was too dense for them to pass, so they bounced on the lake like it
Oh
was
my gosh.
like gelatine or like a trampoline.
I
And I was
just got
like,
a book on this from the
dude,
military on the Mariana Trench, and I was so excited to read it. Now I'm like, as soon as we are done here, I'm gonna find that because
yeah,
I was like, why? What? I forgot why I got this again. I just wanted to look into the trench, but it has all the minerals and everything kind of mapped out by area.
Yeah, it's interesting that we talk about this outer layer thing, but if you look at the Janus project and a lot of the other things NASA's doing, they're going deeper into the sea. The twin-faced God, right? The male and female faces. That's the name of NASA's program, that they look into the Earth and they're like, well, we know more about space than we do about our own Earth, and so that's their claim. So they try to spend as much time researching this, but you never hear about that unless you really look for it. Like, in other words, they're spending more time telling you about these other things which might be analogous to data that they've discovered about our own environment that we can actually get to. And that's why we're often deterred. I mean, at this point, you can't even go anywhere, really.
Also, just to interject, since I am talking about like science and whatever, etc., I don't want to say that I am in support of China. I'm in support of Tartary and recent Tartarians, and that is all I will claim for support in this video.
Oh,
Yeah,
but
if
you claim support for X, that also must mean that you're declaring war on Y, right?
Yes, war on Y. I'm declaring war on Y. That's the best.
Yeah, let's declare war on the Y family.
Oh, that's
Sorry,
good.
no, that was not what I meant.
That's a flashy meme, ready to go. I like it.
Oh, does people know, or do people know who the Y or the family Y is?
Well, I don't think that's been brought up ever. Do you want to go into?
Do it.
Well, it's a Q topic. Q likes to drop the Y in relation to the owl and Bohemian Grove stuff. It's the Holy Grail bloodline.
It's also that the Y is a TH because it makes the Barcelona sound, and so ye old pub is actually the old pub, but the Y also is a convergence symbol. The Y is a convergence symbol of two, like a split dimension from the first dimension.
Right. It's the division. Also could be like a forked tongue in some people's views. But yeah, family Y, QAnon drops about it. Even General Michael Flynn made a tweet where he just inserted the letter Y in between two hashtags. It's it's a pretty big hot topic in QAnon. And it's probably the Rothschilds, but it could be above that as well. And it's funny how the Black Forest stuff is coming out now, slowly but steadily.
Well,
like if you've heard about
their mansion
the lone Rambo that has the whole Germany special ops running after him. If you believe that story, I find that funny. But yeah,
Last year, the Rothschilds' mansion caught fire, right? That was or
they
was that
sold their land for pennies
Yeah.
in 2000. No, I think it was in 2020. Yeah, like earlier this year.
Yeah. After
Yeah.
there's pretty interesting things going on with that. We need to look
Black
more.
Forest. Black Forest stuff is a very dark red pill, and
Actually,
it could scar your soul.
I don't know. I was gonna say I don't know if you have anything that you can screen share. I think we're about. If there's anything else that we can bring up before we end, we should do.
Yeah. Okay.
Pull up some of your stuff.
Okay. Wait. I'll just my. Well, I don't quite know. Up some of the the recent
fading
stuff.
in and out like the Matrix. It was pretty interesting sounds just now.
Oh, it's probably because I connected my my external hard drive. Oh yeah, by the way, stolenhistory.org that you have up there is an excellent site for hidden history research.
Yeah,
people should check it out. Yeah, excellent stuff.
Obviously,
yeah.
Make sure you check out the Discord. We should go to do a banner thing. Where's that at?
Can you get out the invite link, the invitation link, to the chat on live YouTube, so people know?
What's the question? Like how they chat?
Like
with
the
us?
invitation to Discord?
Oh, right. Yeah. So if you go to tartarynova.com, I was about to show that. So you go to tartarynova.com and you can either send us millions of dollars, or you can bypass that step and click on the Tartary Radio chat or Tartary Radio or Tartary Nova. These buttons all seem, except for the YouTube, get you to the Discord. So you can just click on that and it'll open you into the Discord directly. And that's how you find your way. It's pretty sweet. Also, yeah, there's what's it? Teespring, I think it is. I always forget. But there's a new, cooler Tartary t-shirts. I'll show you those.
Right.
Yep, Tartary. We have some pretty sweet designs of Tartary dude shirts that are a bit more cool than they were before.
Oh, you didn't put Walter Bosley on them, did you?
No. These are just these are just kind of sexy statue-esque Tartary wave kind of things. Tartary Arizona tea kind of things going on here. Tartary fanny packs, Tartary socks. There's even
socks.
You might need them. I think if you got your girlfriend a pair of Tartary tights, or even if you wore them, I think if we wanted to, we could rock the Tartary tights. But the most important thing is you can get a Tartary mask so that everywhere you're not allowed to have your mouth open about Tartary, you still have Tartary plastered all over your face. And I think that really that's huge.
Okay.
I'll start
screen sharing.
Where's your screen share?
Yeah.
I could do a dance. Like what am I supposed to do? I'll just put this collectible mini Yoda. Oh, he's a green Yoda, so it's green screened. That's pretty funny. I like that. You can only see him on my chest because Baby Yoda's green.
I just wanted to show some of the stuff that we do on my channel.
There you go. Great.
Right. So like star forts is something we do a lot, right? And people say star forts are military or intended for military defense. And a lot of evidence points to the contrary. For instance, not only the dating of the first star forts are completely out of whack. Wikipedia puts it between the 14 and the 1500s with the Da Vinci drawing the first drawings, supposedly. But in some pretty weird books on the Swiss National Library, or something close to it at least, we can read about Roman history, where in the year AD 52, over 1,000 years before Da Vinci, the Romans were building star forts at Lake Fucino to drain the lake. And they called them here hydraulic machines. Things that make you go, right? star forts, terraforming machines in the Roman times. How does this make sense? It doesn't. So the modern or the common narrative is contradicted by something that is even part of very important architecture and engineering history. This book is pretty authoritative. So yeah, what's going on? And then we can read here about the Basque in Aquitania in the 4th century and how they built star forts and repurposed Roman cities. And they were not primarily for defense or military considerations. That would have required that a wide belt of open ground lay beyond the walls. It is not necessary to assume, we read here, however, that military was the only or even the greatest function performed by these massive fortifications in the 4th century. Their size and design often betrays such a careful attention to architectural aesthetics that one cannot help but suspect that these walls, towers, and gates answered needs beyond the purely military. So he's pointing towards, or the author is alluding to, the star structure, the architectural design, that this points like on prima facie level to functions beyond the purely military. And this is what have been the intuition from a lot of the people who have awoken to the star fort reality that is around us. Their construction, maintenance, and manning were the work of the urban community as a whole. Think about that. They were built, manned, and maintained by the urban community as a whole. They symbolize the commonwealth, I think it should have been here, maybe commonweal, and define community identity in a most tangible fashion. Really interesting. So these star forts are like the entire shebang for these people, right? Define the community identity in the most tangible fashion. So this is the old civilization that has gone before us. The people we are today are not in tune with the thinking these people had. And it is the product of our research that the people who won victory, the winner, wrote out the people who built these things, or not wrote them out by identity, but at least smeared them and changed stuff about them. This is something that is found in the Celtic history. And curiously, as I mentioned earlier, there is a distinction in Celts by their use of languages. And there are the Q Celts and the P Celts. And the Q Celts are the red-haired, taller stock that migrated first out of Tartary after the catastrophe. And they landed in Europe. A funny thing is that you can trace them in early Europe, in Rome and Paris. And they were traced by the use of the letter Q. So wouldn't you know that the Seine didn't used to be called the Seine. It was the Sequani with a Q, Sequani. And Paris was not Lutetia originally. It has also been called Quadisi with a Q. That has all been completely revised. And the idea is with the language wars is that this Q letter or sound had to be revised. And so it was by the P Celts. And the P Celts were the shorter Protonic Phoenician stock that followed the Q Celts out of Tartary. They came later, and they arrived in Latium. They had gained massive wealth and power in Tartary and driven their older brethren to Europe after wars. And these wars were primarily fought over religious ideals, morality. You would have a mixed war with everyone on both sides. It all came down to what book of scripture do you follow? And the two books were the Torah and the Talmud. And the Canaanites brought up the Talmud and drove out a lot of the Torah worshipping Jews, and they fled to Tartary. I have documentation for that.
And these Jews, they became the Quarite Jews with a Q. And these Quarite Jews are Moorish Jews, like you would have your Ethiopians and your Hyksos Tatars, who also ruled old Rome, Saturnia. This is all Q Celtic. These are your star fort builders. And you have the proof in the pudding right here. And this is why they have revised history. And a lot of the star forts on the American coast that the colonists said that they built when they arrived, they were actually just way older forts and ports built by the Basque, the fishermen Basque that were there 400 years prior to Columbus. And they needed to claim these forts to actually claim the land. There were land disputes between the colonizers. You know, you had Spain, you had England, you had France. They all tried to lay claims to all different sorts of territories. If they would have said that, well, some of these forts were not actually built by us, that would have been a major problem for their claim of land, right? You see? So these forts needed to be have a new told history. It was a necessity. It was not like we're the deep state and we're gonna lie. Well, the effect is the same, but you know, it's important with the details. Let's read here. In coming to America, the Tatars crossed a narrow sea, which was shallow and difficult to cross in boats, being full of islands, and they only reached shore after great hardships and suffering. These and other traditions, together with their personal appearance, although they throw little light on their origin, are not contrary to the belief of many that they are descendants of the Mongolian Tartarian race, and once lived in the country called Chinese Tartary or Kitai. That they were compelled from some cause, the Great Catastrophe, the Great Flood, to seek a new country. That the narrow sea which they crossed was that of Bering, and to the islands, the Aleutian group. In crossing Siberia, they left numerous and extensive mounds and fortifications, such as have been excavated in the United States and Mexico. This seems the most reasonable of the many suppositions in regard to a history from which all mystery can never be cleared. Yes, indeed. These are your mound builders, the Tatars, and also your star fort builders. Let's read here in another article. The mysterious people who built the mounds were not a race of rovers. An infinitely long time must have been required for erecting each huge earth shape, nor were they ignorant savages, for the mounds showed deep knowledge of geometry, as well as of astronomy, and of the principles of building. Carefully laid out military fortifications abound in the mound builders' country, indicating that the Aborigines had martial law and engineering skill, and that they understood many modern principles of attack and defense. Well, this is because, well, the proof is in the pudding. Military fortifications means star forts. But they related to, well, so they conclude that the Tatars then knew these same things as the Europeans were using these forts for. But that is a gross assumption that they need to make. But what is really important is here that martial law identifies these military fortifications here as star forts. And you can see here that they are said to be of mound builder origin once again. And the mound builders are related to the Basque. Algonquian and Mi'kmaq can be understood by Welsh and Basque people. And Basque is a Turanian language. It belongs to the Turanian family of languages. The Turanian languages are also part of Chinese Tartarian.
The Vostochny Volcanic language hypothesis, right? So really quickly, can you give me the 20 seconds because I want to show something because of this. If you look at the Basque, it's really
I'm all ears.
I just want to jack it for a second because, you know, I'm sorry I said it that way. But the Basque language, there's been a number of hypotheses about how it came into existence. One is the the origin of Basque, the idea that it was a indigenous group. Another was that it came through there, but one of the best ones that no one gives any credit to is the Volcanic substratum theory, which is that essentially during the last ice age that the language was kind of broken down, and there's a few remnants in Celtic and Canterbury and Racine, but for the most part the Basques are the last remnant, although you can still see their grammar in Japanese. And this confused a lot of people, but ignoring indications that the ancient Etruscan language seemed more closely related to Anatolian languages, when you start looking at the Etruscan alphabet, and this is something we've talked about before, it's mirrored backwards from Latin. So this idea that Latin sort of erupted out of maybe the Occidental region of France from reading backwards or misinterpreting the cuneiform or the printing press copies, the reversal copies of the letters. That might be a big part of why Basque is one of the last pieces of this puzzle that fits together the whole language.
Well,
back to you.
I know that Basque is highly, debated on its origins, but a theme that I note always when they don't have knowledge of something that they should have a leading theory on, that raises the alarms, the Tartary alarms especially, because there is a lack of insight apparently from scholars when it comes to the origins of the Mongols and the origins of the Scythians and the Tatars and the Huns and the Freemasons and the Knights Templar and the Aztec and the Inca and the Maya and the Cambodians. All these things that are, or all these people who are very Saturnian in philosophy and nature, and also seems very highly related to Tartary, they just don't know. They just don't know. Right? Isn't that strange?
And it's amazingly floating cities like Aztec designs. I mean, come on. Everything.
This is Tenochtitlan, yeah. This is Tenochtitlan.
No one
as
wants
viewed.
To look at it. Yeah, this could be really what it looked like when they got there.
Yeah, no, I know it is because you know the timeline. They say themselves that Cortez arrives. He sees Tenochtitlan. He has 500 men with him. He goes, we need to kill these people. And then he summons these 500 men towards this, and he buries this thing, and the lake is gone. This is the official narrative, people.
Seems like no one wants to admit it, but
so if you see this city with a lake, it is pre-Cortez. It can only be that, or their narrative is wrong. Logics. I love it.
We live in a civilization. Oh yeah, more
and
Mexico.
Look here, Star Forts, more Tenochtitlan with a lake.
I was recently rereading some of Tenochtitlan's messenger notes, who'd gone to see the conquistadors, and they said when they saw them that they demanded that they fight to the death because they wanted to see these great, soldiers fight to the death, and they said, "Eat with us tonight, and then tomorrow we'll fight to the death because it's that's how we do things."
So Viking,
and
so
yes.
Kata.
So the Scythians ran off because they were freaked out. They're like, our leader would be really upset with us if we did that, probably, because we're supposed to ask him before we do anything. So, and they're like, no, you got to do it. It's disrespectful not to. They're like, what? Like, this is so confusing. So they snuck off and they went home.
Right. I just wanted also to show this, the MacLeod clan, Drumpf, directly tied to Rurik, the legendary Viking or Tatar. So he was displaced by the Romanovs, right? You see? So I found this fascinating. Also, Charlemagne here ties in. So you can see Trump's blood is very interesting. I also like how Hamlet comes in here. But yeah, you can read that yourself because we are moving on.
Come visit it on the Discord.
Yeah, I'm right now. I'm just like, what should I be showing? Oh, this is interesting. Leibniz, the Tartarian philosopher. Not really apparent from here. What I just wanted to show is that the pursuit of happiness comes from Leibniz. In different ways, all of these individuals contributed economic, political, and philosophical ideas that flowed from Leibniz's concept of happiness, a concept which Leibniz called an active and progressive state in which new degrees of perfection are constantly being attained. This had to be, the pursuit of happiness that later was understood by Benjamin Franklin. And Benjamin Franklin was one of the few guys in that age that were privy to Leibniz's writings, because Leibniz, after his untimely death, was frowned upon. His works were, gone out of, it was not pop. And that's what they say. But I think in reality it was really censored, because it explained that Franklin had to be in contact with Rosicrucians in Europe to actually obtain this, because Leibniz was one of the really big Rosicrucians of his age. The whole idea is that you use scientific progression that is released in a specific time and date to further humanity on the scale towards universal enlightenment. So the Declaration of Independence came in part from Leibniz's philosophy. And why is that interesting in relation to Tartary? Because Leibniz spent 11 or 12 years before he became a philosopher studying Tartarian languages. And he described himself as a Sinophile, but in our line of thinking, that is really Tartarophile. They were hiding back then the name of Tartary. He was hugely interested in Manchurian China. So that is the Kitayan Tatars. So that is where Kublai Khan had his white city, his white peace empire, and that is where Marco Polo, when he was 17 years, spent 17 years in Kitai, again Q, with Kublai Khan, who can also be seen spelled with a Q, both with the Kublai and the Khan. And basically, Marco Polo is Christian Rosenkreuz. So Polo spends time with Kublai Khan, learns the Rosicrucian art from the Khan himself, learns the art of encoding military communication, and brings this back to Europe. And this is why there are so many stories about Polo being a liar. We cannot trust his accounts of Tartary, while still he's a great explorer that furthered human understanding of the East. It's a huge contradiction, and it is reconciled by this hidden war with Rosicrucians and the Golden Dawn on one side and the other, the Hermetic Brotherhood and the Saturnian Brotherhood. The Hermeticists, they worship Jupiter and put Mercury on the throne of the mysteries, when in reality it is Saturn. It has always been Saturn. He is the ruler of the zodiac, the ruler of the mysteries, the ruler of astrology. And they installed Mercury there. And Jupiter and Mercury in this age have been on the mutable cross. It is a recipe for disaster. It's why everything is there's no stability. It's chaos underneath the surface. Jupiter brings that quality in Pisces. He is a great deceiver. Just read about Zeus in mythology. Like, if people think Jupiter is, benevolent, just go read about Zeus. He was a ruthless ruler. He's exactly what the Vatican worships. Jupiter, Peter, Saint Peter. He had an uncontrollable sexual appetite. Doesn't sound like Vatican, doesn't it? So Jupiter versus Saturn. They have smeared Saturn. They have made you believe by this little phonetic similarity between Saturn and Satan, everything was ruined and critical thought was ceased. You don't think about Kronos, don't you? Oh, but no, Kronos cannot be Satan, can he? Because he ruled the Golden Age. Stark contradictions. And I'm tired of the demonization of Saturn. because it all comes down to a lack of understanding of alchemy and astrology. This is interesting as well. So apparently there was a Solomon's Temple in Pennsylvania. Weird, right? This point was formerly known as Solomon's Temple, but from whence it is derived its name, no one appears to know. Interesting. Pennsylvania is a keystone state on the 40th parallel. This, like Ben and I, we showed this ad infinitum in our podcast on the Buggeman. Like, this is the original Fugio cent Benjamin Franklin designed. Look at the Q with the sundial. And
Wow.
you have mind your business, which can also be translated to mind your P's and Q's.
And
The
a good
deep
and a
state
good Etruscan
war.
and Latin backwards Pig Latin joke there, the P's and Q's. But also we were told in school that P's and Q's have to do with pints and quarts for some reason. They were saying that in the New English bars, the colonialists would have to remember their pints and quarts because they would have a tab. I don't remember why they thought that was the reason, but that was their story.
Oh, I think you deserve this one is deserved of reading as well. This is about Kitai. I was just talking about Kublai Khan and his White City Empire in Kitai, which is the old name for Tartaria. So let's read. The Legend of Kitai. This strange country is called Kitai, and the ruler thereof is one Kublai Khan, a mighty warrior who, by reason of his strong will and trusty sword, has made himself lord of the whole land. His government is both wise and just, and it is administered for rich and poor alike, without fear of favor. On the king's birthday, the people observe what is called the White Feast. Then are the king and his court assembled in a great room of the palace, which is all white. So the palace is all white. The floor of marble and the walls hung with curtains of white silk. All are in a white apparel, and they offer unto the king white gifts to show that their love and loyalty are without a stain. The rich bring their lord pearls and carvings of ivory, white chargers, and costly embroidered garments. The poor present pigeons, white doves, and handfuls of rice. Nor doth the great king regard one gift above another, so long as all are white. White hats, and so they keep the king's birthday. And why I'm pointing you to Lord of the Rings is that this is quite stunning. I thought I had it here. Yeah. So, okay, we just learned about Kitai, right? And we just saw.
Quickly, I was trying to unmute to say this, that white is in Chinese considered to be associated, specifically with the Hmong Chinese, associated with death. So I find that interesting also as a death color, world bridging.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I'll remind me of that afterwards because I need to finish this with the Lord of the Rings. So Kitai, right? The White City. We just learned of the White Feast. And Kitai is the outermost eastern edge of the world, right? So back in the day, that would have been the limits of the known world. So now, think about where Gondor is in Lord of the Rings, the White City there. Think about what I just said. And now read this. Kitai none knew aught of the inhabitants, or if there were inhabitants, of the regions that we now know as India, Sumatra, Japan, Korea, and the eastern coasts of Asia and Africa. It was supposed that the farthest extreme or eastern edge of Kitai ran off into a region of continual darkness, a bog or marsh, or should we say swamp, where all manner of strange beasts, hobgoblins, and monsters roared and howled? What is beyond Gondor? What is beyond those? What is beyond this? Mordor. Did we just learn what Tolkien read about before he envisioned Mordor? and what Lord of the Rings and the Middle Earth is really based on. Note that I said Middle Earth because China or Kitai had a name. You know, you can see here China. To themselves, the land is the Middle Kingdom. The Tatar appellation, Kitai. This name, however, was applied by the Tatars to their own country. That's another point. Tatars did never call themselves Tatars. Just keep that in mind. We need to find the real name of the empire, as it was called by themselves. This is a clue, Kitai, the Tatar appellation. This name, however, was applied by the Tatars to their own country. It's one of the only clues I've ever found.
So, like, they called themselves the fatherland or the motherland, the way Russia and Germany refer to themselves sometimes in colloquialism.
Yeah, maybe, but I'm just saying we need to have that research done at some point. We need to locate the Tartarian language, find out how to decode it, and find out what they called themselves and what it meant in their language.
I feel like this would be kind of like, let's say the United States, of America goes by USA, or it goes by in South America. So at some point, if they're remembered by the sounds of what they're being referred to, not necessarily as what the official title is.
Well, we're also assuming like syntax and languages. It could be hieroglyphics, could be ideas expressed in these old worlds. So we wouldn't necessarily be privy to actually what they had in mind for us. Huh, it's funny how I end up with Putin here.
It's a pretty interesting mind thought right there on symbology. If the language is pre-phonetic, if it's etymologically iconographic, so you have to understand symbols, to make up a word. So that's kind of crazy. Boogeyman, I cannot hear you. Boogie. Oh, did you freeze? I think he's frozen. Well, I'll do another dance. We've got about 77 viewers right now, which is pretty great, and we're about 2 hours in. I wonder if you all have some questions. Why don't you ask those questions while I fade into the I Study Tartary green screen meme. Looking over here, Brittany did have to do something. She'll be back to talk about Reichenbach. And yeah, I'm going to send Victor a link to this again to get him back in there, because I think we're going to keep going for a while because we have some more information to share. So let's see here. And we can talk about trains and clowns and stuff, I guess. What do you guys think? Any questions you guys have? I'm going to look over some of the comments here. Roman concrete, we talked about that. We put this one up earlier, but Roman concrete used in the 19th century was forgotten and had to be recently reverse engineered too. Well, sort of. But like, how many families do you know who their whole life was making concrete? So, send that back to Victor. So like, concrete has been like a secret thing forever. Hey, there he is. The Buggeman.
I don't know what now. The internet is acting up. Like communication stuff going on.
You shouldn't that stuff, man. It's too deep. No, I'm just kidding. Put it back on the
screen. Okay, can I just quickly get your thoughts about the Lord of the Rings Kitai connection?
Oh, yeah. I think
model.
So you C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien used to hang out in a bar, and they would talk about God and the devil. And eventually, they decided they were both Christian, right? But their whole thing was that they had a deeper understanding, which is what led them to it. And also, what that means is what they believed is very much more complex than the simple story that normal people who called themselves those things were. So then they both wrote these books about Middle Earth, like Middle Tartary. J.R.R. Tolkien's kind of given the example of like what the world used to be like in his best example. And I think part of it is just his fantasy to an extent. But you have to remember, that's a small part of it. Most of his fantasy is based on his linguistic studies and his historical study. I mean, J.R.R. Tolkien's born in Africa as a British.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So it's like he's inundated with the symbols and he's trying to make sense of it. So, you know, as being a colonialist with, you know, a rich, well, not super duper, yeah, but kind of like he's pretty wealthy, like in a sense, and he was doing pretty well by having his own land, and he was well educated, and so looking into all these things, of course, making your own fictitious sci-fi about the past is going to be about what's real, you know, essentially. He's like, well, this is kind of, and then he would just tell that story as best he could. So is it perfect? No. But yeah, is it based on all kinds of interesting stuff? And do I wish I had access to his personal library? Yeah, if I had J.R.R. Tolkien's library, I think we'd be way better off. And the same thing goes for Smithsonian, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And Tolkien was known to, like, it was a pretty well-known rumor that Tolkien's private collection was very esoteric, very arcane. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tolkien had access to a lot of knowledge and maps and old books that we would absolutely love to go over in terms of Tartarian research. Yeah, and Tolkien, like, some of my favorite quotes come from Tolkien's books. Like you know, I have a very strong intuition about Tolkien being a massive white hat. I just cannot shake it. So yeah, my boy Tolkien.
Speaking of which, J. Doe says that your logo looks like the benign eye of Sauron, which is pretty funny.
The benign. Well, I'll take that. Yeah, let's just let's pamper up Sauron a bit. Let's make him. Yeah, what is the best act of kindness Sauron could possibly make?
Probably screen share. I think if I was Sauron
Okay.
and I had the eye of Sauron, literally that'd be what I'd. It's the nicest thing you could do with it.
So you think that is his ceiling for goodness? He can screen share. That's funny, Andreas.
I really do.
I really do. But Andreas, I'll let you take the stage a bit. I want to know something about flight. We touched a bit about it, but I want to know specifically about, let's call it just Exertus aviation. Can we call it that?
Like ionic like lift or something, like electromagnetic.
No, the whole genre you had, the whole section you had where you went into ancient flight and you know static electricity, biplanes and stuff. Like, can we just call that Exertus aviation? And can you just like explain it?
Exertus aviation. That sounds pretty sweet. Well, I think there are some people that are working in this field right now. Like, for instance, Jeremiah, the technician who I've had on before. I think we should talk to him again. He's making gliders out of balsa wood and fiberglass, which are super light. And when you start to coat them with certain kinds of polymers, and at that time it could have been even just the way it's designed, friction can cause from, you know, sputtering. You can sputter something like hitting with a horse brush your hand against it, it flickers a bunch of, you know, particles, tiny little toothpaste splatter across the mirror style. You can sputter a surface. So you can have static electricity caused just from flight, because as things are moving, this moves something even more, and there can be a certain amount of lift even without batteries.
Show us some biplanes while you're talking.
Okay, yeah, this is great. Like, let's see here. Like, would be a thing for historic. I mean, I don't have anything super prepared on that right this second, but I'll grab one.
Oh, shame.
I know. I didn't know that was my topic.
I tried to reenact the Cersei shame ritual.
Shame. Yeah, put the shame box is good. But yeah, like walk down the street. But yeah,
body shaming galore.
but this. That wouldn't, and by the way, that wouldn't work for me. You know what I mean? I would just be like, okay, like the whole walk out of the city. But-
You would go around with your fanny pack and your little audio speakers, and
Even
just
if I
like
was,
dance.
if I'm allowed to have that, even though I'm naked, that's totally fine. Then that sounds like fine. I would just play cool music. But all right, so we've got this plane. It's got an engine. This is an 1800s plane. If we start looking at the Mayan, let's see, Mayan and Egyptian. Oh, why is this software just like I've had a problem with it today? Mayan plane.
Mayan plane. It also reminds me of that Indian guy that looks like Freddie Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
And he used Mercury in his bamboo plane to take flight. I think it was a decade before the Wright brothers.
This was an article
Indian guy.
from about 5 years ago where these I think they were in
Oh yeah, the
Shenzhen.
Mayan planes. Okay.
They actually 3D printed models of the Shenzhen plane to see if they would fly and how they would look. And they, even though they're a little ridiculous, there's a point to it because of the way it's bent. It actually does have a function to it, and so you can see
aerodynamic, or
certain parts of it are specifically aerodynamic, but also it requires certain kinds of material. So using thinner kinds of material that we've talked about before, a lot of the planes.
So it's also nanotech, or
it's some kind of, even if it was a gold mylar foil or something like that, then these things could have been more like gliders. And then so that's one of the reasons we've looked into blimps, because some of these things have blimp-like designs. But there's been successful flying with these designs.
So this is not a powered flight?
Correct. But you can add power, right? And this is when you're a kid, if you're making planes like this, like the rubber band plane.
So it's just funny because like when you talk about Coriolis effects happening underneath planes, a lot of the ballers say, "Oh, it has to be powered flight."
Well, okay, so
that's because it's powered flight.
So everybody jokes. I don't think I made this very clear, and I wish I had. Flintstones flight. Okay, so in the Flintstones flight episode, the very first episode, they make a mock Da Vinci kind of flying helicopter, and he's got pumps and he's pedaling, and that's how he flies. Okay, and if you look at let's see here, it's very close to Da Vinci. Why is this for vaporwave? Da Vinci flight. Okay, so in Da Vinci's flight design, similarly, you have a pedal that's being pumped, but it's a little bit more complicated. If you start to look at it, you can start to see what's really going on here. It's a little hard, but when you get the words written backwards, by the way, if you start to know what he's getting at, you get back to the rubber band plane.
Right.
And so the rubber band plane, right now you're thinking, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense because once it's run out, right? But the thing is, it spins the other way, and then you can continually tighten it by spinning up some sort of a pedal that retightens the back end of it. And then you start spinning it the other way once it's tightened up the other way. And so it helps itself. And what material will you use? You'd use a wet hemp. And so a wet hemp would allow yourself. And so an example also of that is a bow drill. This is a bow drill, which is used to make fire. And what they do is it pulls it back and forth. There's a way that instead of just pulling it back and forth, you pedal it down by pushing on top of it. And then as you push the thing down, there you go. Well,
right.
There's also a different one where you're like a drill, press drill, hand, Indian. I don't know the word for this one. I forget what it's called. Ancient.
Yeah. Do you remember that Mercury thing from
Which
India?
one? Which
the
one?
Mercury bamboo plane. It was literally a guy from India gathered some bamboo, fastened it together, used some liquid mercury, and boom, flight.
Oh, right. Yeah. And so that gets into the idea of putting foil that has liquid mercury in it and what you can do with electricity once you have a current going. And so these things also, they rely on wind, but you can continually power something like this by going up and down. And so they really did have access to secondary flight, plus the idea of aluminum and ammonia gas. So aluminum is only
Yeah.
really available through electrolysis, but ammonia gas is a percussion or a repercussion from the extraction and the electrolysis process from the mineral it comes from. So once you get NH3 and it's contained, and you can contain this again in silk and canvas, then you're able to make these really explosive balloons. And this could be, unless you're making like hydrocarbon fluoride, which we looked at earlier, hydrocarbon fluoride, hydrofluorocarbon, which is also different. Hydrofluorocarbon. Hydrofluorocarbons are nuts, and look at how structurally integral this is. And so these are the things that never go away, is the HFCs. And so you'll find that the biggest cause of them, we were saying earlier, 47% came from air conditioning machines, refrigerators all around the United States and South America and Europe, and up until the mid 80s, early 90s, they started to really work away from this tech. But that was always a huge issue. So
Right.
Oh man, am I not showing that window? That's a bummer. I was that was really bad. I'm sorry.
Typical.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was trying to show you this picture of hydrofluorocarbon model. And then where's the other one I had? This is a hydrofluorocarbon. Gosh, it never wants to just Google it. I don't know what is going on, but recently DuckDuckGo has not been working for me, and I've been really sketched out. They're like, no.
Well, a lot of things, different small changes are occurring, like restructuring, it seems, behind the scenes. A lot of people are coming forward, like claiming like some mid-level insider knowledge and saying that, oh, they hear such and such is going on. Like thousands of these these messages going on Facebook and Twitter, and like probably 50% of them are not credible. But if some of them are, a lot is happening. So yeah, a lot of like small stuff, seemingly small stuff, but when added together, it becomes a massive reset. Yeah, like what I hear is that the banks have been told to not say anything about Nasara. It doesn't help them. They're trying to bang in on the little that they have left when it comes to the time. And the mid-level people in the banking, well, they're oblivious. Like we're only talking bank directors and such, people above that as well. And yeah, they know Nasara is inbound, is what I'm hearing. And it's funny how all these reports are coming in from so many different people. But
where's that thing that you posted about Antarctica and the speakeasy? Did you post that?
Yeah, that was something that was floating around on Facebook, and I just I had to repost it in there because there was a doubt in me that was like, is it fake, real? Like I couldn't really get it to make sense, so I just had to hear your guys' take on it, and I put it to rest. Like if it's real, we'll see. Oh, okay. So I want to show you something, Andreas, on the topic of airships. Okay. I'll just share my screen again. Can you just briefly summarize the official narrative of airships?
Well, I mean, so what's the official narrative exactly?
Like if you by dates, like if you can take it from
sometime
French.
Sometime in the 9th century at least, we've got Incans are using these flying gliders, and you've got using
if you go into Wikipedia, it starts with the Brazilian Gusmão, right?
Well, yeah, Gusmão is like 1709, right? Is that right? I think.
Yeah.
And so by that point, there's already several examples in China. But sure, and the Peruvians argue that they did it first. But Gusmão, he's got a glider, and he sends it back to Portugal, and that's the first report to the European throne of the technology.
And that was the first report of flight, not manned flight, but just flight, right?
Yeah, the concept even of a glider in the air, I think, is all he even had, or maybe he had like some wind caught.
And then you had the Montgolfier brothers creating or performing manned flight like some decades after in France, right?
Right, but even similarly, at the same time, you have Ben Franklin was using kites apparently. So as a kid, so the story gets really convoluted. But keep going.
Yeah, because where I'm going with this is that apparently in Germany, before Guzmao shows the world unmanned flight with hot air balloons, apparently the Germans are doing helium experiments and taking manned flight with airships, like literally ships in the air. And when did they do this? They did that, and this is only the publication date.
1697 is when they wrote about it.
Look at that. Look at those. Four of them. I just find it, fascinating. This seems like the Tartarian stock in Germany,
I
and
like the
some part
rowboat
of their history.
too, with these like kind of they obviously look like these balloons look sort of they look futuristic, maybe shiny or something they're trying to say. And it's a sailboat. It's a sailboat being lifted by these things essentially.
Yeah, you can see here the technicality. Imagine the level of chemistry you would need a pretty high level of chemistry, right? Chemistry knowledge to isolate the helium even is a big job, and to put it there in exact dimensions and to control that and be able to fly with that is amazing.
Are we sure this is helium and not ammonia? Did you read that?
No, I'm just assuming helium, right?
In one way or another, it's a gas. But it's interesting at this point because you have to imagine what it was like when people were experimenting with gases, because they're creating gases as byproducts to all these reactions, and you're buying novel gases to inhale. This is how nitrous oxide was discovered. At one point, someone was probably trying to get high, and they took helium, and then they were like, "This is really false." So the gases have all these strange effects. Ammonia kills you in some respects. You should be very careful when you mix it with bleach or chlorine, because you can get ammonia chloride gas that can kill you or make you blind, etc. But again, solar photovoltaic light on a metallic balloon heating up ammonia, one of the better kinds of balloons. It'll explode sometimes, which is what all those early stories are of explosive airships in general. They have in France.
Yeah.
There's a number of stories of exploding.
But we know the Hindenburg was a false flag.
Right, yeah. That's not even fair. I mean, that was a diesel engine that exploded, not the...
Yeah, it was a straw man. And people was like, but there must have been so many people that must have wondered about that. Like, how can we take down a whole industry just based on something that wasn't even from the industry, like proper, that burned?
You know what I really blame the Hindenburg? What I blame on the Hindenburg? Sex and violence in the media.
Well, yeah, that started in Germany pretty early, yeah.
Okay, fine. Now take it real.
But the Bolsheviks, and that's if we go into like Owen Benjamin stuff, the Jewish porn peddling, that was pretty early on in Germany, right? You can see how there still was, if you have that going on, then that there is some sort of power grab. They're trying to destabilize someone morally, right? So you saw that happen in Denmark and Germany first with the pornography coming out. So it was funny how they attacked and destabilized us morally first.
That's true. Maybe, and then like the same time, you've got blimps that are flying that are just resurgences of this old technology, and they're using the safest methods possible, and they're going. These ships went about the speed of a car. They're like 60 miles an hour. They're not super fast. They're not super dangerous. The whole idea that this thing was dangerous is completely, yeah. As you said, a straw man. It's totally a straw man, so that they could end an entire technology from being utilized. But I think we've shown pictures before of the Lockheed blimps and Zeppelins, which are the difference being that a Zeppelin and a blimp, one has the frame and the other does not. A Zeppelin has
Yeah.
a frame and it does not. But this, it's a hard decision what you call nanotechnology. It looks like it's a frame anyway. So,
well, yeah, it's funny, and this new well, POTUS has been talking about, like, in a
As a-
year we will live in a new medical reality, transportation will radically change, right? And Space Force is up, Starlink, internet for the whole earth, world peace. Such things are talked about as realistic goals.
look how small though the ship is compared to the blimp. So you also have to to reckon with the fact that this thing has to displace this much weight, and this much weight is, if depending on what's in here. So we have really, some of the future has to be on wire. There has to be just a long cable that things are carried on. And then that will really displace a lot of the issues, because you could just have a train, a Zeppelin train, monorail. It's on one cable.
Yeah, man. Wow.
Brittany's back. What's up, Brittany?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about this could be like a good spot to end it. Gotten pretty far around. Not that I want to.
If you're exhausted,
I was
Brittany,
just.
No,
yeah.
you're. It's late there. That's totally fine. If you want, I can continue, because I know Brittany had a couple of things that she was going to present.
Okay.
But yeah, no worries.
Yeah,
man.
I'm pretty exhausted. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks a lot for coming through, man, and we'll do this again soon.
Yeah, man. Epic
Bye,
to do the recent Tartarians again. Epic to have you talk again, Brittany. Don't be shy. We love your stuff.
Yeah.
Do this
see
some
if we
more,
get to
okay?
Yes, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Okay.
But thanks.
I'll just plead. Yeah. Okay. Andreas, thanks. I'll be going.
Cool, man. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks for sharing.
How do I exit this voluntarily?
I'll just do the kick button.
Oh, leave studio.
Ta-da! All right. Brittany, you were saying volcano things. We're about 2:30 in. So what is it that you were what was the thing you?
Not much. I was gonna say we could segue or start a new show maybe on this. And I don't know. You have a lot of people listening, but we could come back and revisit how to cover this, or people could maybe say what they want to hear about. I don't know. There's lots.
Well, you had said you'd left up. You said you wanted to say. I was just reading back. Where was it?
Oh, that was to fill. If you wanted to fill space and talk about interesting people, Karl von Reichenbach is who I've been waiting to read the book of. I have a couple of his books right here, and he's kind of a scientist that's been kind of left out, hung out to dry, and smeared in the press. And he's got just these letters on, let's see, OD. But I got into the research a little bit, and it was really interesting. It's on sensitives, and going back to like even William James and his early studies in the paranormal. But it was just taking sensitives and seeing if they could see different anomalies, and they were seeing. This should be a whole episode on von Reichenbach. He's becoming one of my scientific heroes, just because of what he did. I don't know. They had many different people in dark rooms identifying specifically magnets and the auroras and the images surrounding the magnets and the things being seen by the people that were more sensitive. And it's got a whole, I don't even know the name of it. I just started learning about, I think I sent you an article, but we should almost read through the article, the wizard, what is a wizard? The sorcerer, as he's described by the few people that talk about him. And I found like one video, a couple, like on YouTube, that kind of highlights what he's done. And his other book, the main one I have, is out in the garage, but I should have that. It's someone everybody should be looking into. And yeah, he's kind of got the unifying theory where he's bringing in the Odic force, or OD, which has been studied as like orgone by Wilhelm Reich, It's kind of the life element that even, what's his name, Theoria Phasis, the math guy.
Reichenbach expanded on the works of previous scientists such as Galileo Galilei, who believed the Earth's axis was magnetically connected to a universal central force in space.
Mm-hmm. So he brings in all the elements. He does a lot with crystals and healing, and just his studies were like kind of duplicated without even, like, inadvertently. So they have reports of all these corroborating studies that had, similar results to what he was finding, and it was just kind of removed from our history. And I think most of the sensitives then were either taken to work for the CIA or for, political leaders and figures, because it's how the CIA studied remote viewing. They've taken these people in, and there's people in the Discord, and even people that are maybe listening that are sensitives still. I feel like a big part of the fluoride the push for fluoride was possibly to inhibit the sensitives. And if anyone's ever been able to feel like they can see things with their eyes closed in spaces or different energies, then this is a scientist that might validate what you've always known or tried to explain to others who think you're crazy. I don't know.
It's fringy, because it's like that TV show Fringe. Maybe you just have some secret training or some secret serum.
Oh, Fringe. Yeah, Fringe is a show that goes over pretty much all of the well, not all, but a lot of the MK Ultra and secret, like even geometaphysics and CERN type projects that were classified that aren't classified anymore, or parts aren't. And one of the coolest episodes they had was on the Thor bomb, and it was this little, I don't know if you want to call it little, but it looked like just a bullet that could dig through the earth and hit a target, and it was like a drill bomb. And I thought, when I was watching that was like, okay, there's a little bit probably linked to my volcanosophy or my volcano research.
Well, the reason it worked in that story was that it could shake apart, kind of like Reichenbach and Royal Rife talked about, shaking apart elements so that something solid or coherent could pass through the plasmoidal incohesive state, or the moments when they're incohesive of a solid object. So you could go through walls,
it's like
or you could also go through the earth.
That was the graphite material. This was it created that bomb that they had never seen before, an eruption, an explosion I'd never seen. So yeah, I'm sure they were jumping through warps and whatnot, but they were also using them to remote detonate from wherever, going through the earth, undetectable, to blow things up below the earth and cause a bunch of seismic conundrum. That's something I haven't researched. I haven't got the actual data, so I don't even want to speculate on that until I have.
What about just in terms of human body? What are your thoughts on Reichenbach's Odic force?
Odic force. The life energy, or I would.
Yeah, I mean, as far as
okay, so. His final book is the book I've been waiting to read so that I know enough to understand it, which I don't know if that'll ever happen, but because I'm excited. I know it's going to have a lot of the answers that a lot of your researchers have been looking into, and I want to try and get the copy to them as well. But just even with Wilhelm Reich's original research that he was sending to Einstein, and there's intercepted by the secretary, who was an SS agent, and he was showing that it was like an actual life creation. You could get dead cells, and this orgone energy, when charged, could create life. And he had duplicated it and repeated it, and that was interesting. But then he did the studies on negative energy, negative energy. Go ahead, negative energy, and positive. So he studied the orgasm, and he studied anxiety and stress situations. So the ethics of his studies have been in question. He's also the one with the cloudbuster that the FDA took because he had figured or helped figure out, geoengineering tactics in certain regards. But with that, he was showing different color charges with his energy lab machines. And in one case, there's a book he has called Contact with Space, where they have this giant laser and they're firing it at the sky, this laser beam, and something falls from wherever they're pointing it at. But like the lab tech allegedly, had seizures and suffered paralysis after operating this type of laser beam. So as far as the odic force, or if you want to call it, orgone energy, that I think we're seeing now in articles in physics come out in the geosciences and atmospheric sciences about this particle, and it's not a particle, this field of science that's been neglected since the Michelson-Morley experiment, that either would have suggested the Earth isn't rotating how we think it is, or and there's there's orgone, there's energy there. Or if the Earth is moving how we think it is, the energy isn't there. So instead of looking into that, they said, well, no, the Earth has to be rotating like we've been taught. So there is no orgone energy. There is no odic force. There is no unifying theory between all of these fields, when really that's what it is. And that's how you're going to get your anti-grav machines. You have to be measuring elements of it. And what's so unique about this odic force is, I think a little bit was talked about by Peter. I mean, everybody that's in the Discord is keen to what this is, but I want to know more about the positive and negative, because anger comes out and we have loud, angry voices, and that's heat and that's hot. Vibration, it's all connected. But I was thinking about just like the movie Monsters Inc., when they're collecting these kids that are scared and they're in fear, and they fill up the energy like this much, and then spoiler alert, they start to make them laugh, and the energy is more. I want to look into the science on energy production from life force, life energy, and learn more about that. And if we have satellites, we have 5G, what is tapping that, and what's learning from that. This odic
also
force.
cloud busting with odic force. I mean, it seems like I remember Catholic kids in school used to think when they masturbated it rained, and I mean, I thought they were crazy until
Interesting.
You're still crazy. But Wilhelm Reich and these virginal Catholic boys probably had this in common, that they believe cloud busting, I mean, key emphasis here on busting, is causing this orgone energy to become present in the atmosphere. And it's interesting because, for a long time, intellectually, like, you kind of want to separate sexuality from magnetism. I don't know. It just seems like it's special or something. Mm-hmm. But really, you can't. It's just part of magnetism. Everything's just a bunch of
But if you look at magnetism, that word is so misleading, because we're looking at an electromagnetic, like it's a pulse. And if we're looking at like positive and negative charge, just pretty much what we've been taught about how magnetism work isn't accurate, and I'm the last person that should explain that. Theoria Facius is his name, does a really good job of talking about dielectricity and explaining that mechanism versus what we've termed as this force of gravity, and just how that impacts science and math and what we can and can't do, or what we're told we can and can't do on Earth in this realm. But they're scientists, they've definitely been suppressed, and they have lots of publications and backed research throughout the world. And I think it'd be cool to maybe do a series just on Reichenbach a little bit and expose some of his experiments, perhaps.
Just as long as it can have some Kate Bush soundtrack too, because I think that's important to recognize that Kate Bush did make a music video, or 11, arguably, about Reichenbach and Wilhelm Reich and Royal Reich, which they created these cloud busting, each one of them working on this idea of weather control. And a big part of what Kate Bush is about. I almost didn't mention it, except that literally she's a freaking reference in this Wikipedia article on it, which is just, that's too much, man. It's like a link. It's not even just a link. It's like an embedded link as a reference. I've never seen that.
What's interesting about that video too, about Organon, her cloud busting video, is what's his name? Sutherland's in it. Donald Sutherland, who's the master in
and he's
Mockingbird.
Yeah. Where is it? Oh, she's just talking about it here. That's even weirder.
Did she talk about Wilhelm Reich in here? Or
Probably.
the making of it?
I wonder if I'll get in trouble for putting this video up, so I probably won't actually play it.
Yeah,
so I'll have to find out later. But it's interesting. Tell you what, and Donald Sutherland, his son, Kiefer Sutherland, named after a cultured yogurt drink, more or less. I mean, like, is that not the most West Coast thing you've ever heard? Just a thought.
Funny.
All right.
So,
well, parapsychology and Wilhelm Reich. I thought that was worth mentioning too.
Well, in parapsychology, so William James is the founding father of psychology, or Wilhelm Wundt, if you want to get into argument about it. Structuralism and functionalism psychology, but he originally studied the paranormal, and that's what got him into psychology, is these people that were super sensitives. Wilhelm Reich studied not just super sensitives, he studied the energy that he thought could be measured in people. So like a heat, like people get angry, what can we measure about this? People get happy, people can have orgasms, how? And then he also, I mean, his work on just, you know, sex in general is, I don't know how far or how close anyone's come. I know there's all this Kinsey stuff, but it's like, it's all, I mean, he's documented things that should have been like in cosmopolitan magazines for women and men reading about sex. Like, there's information that he has that people have no idea about their bodies and themselves. And so that's also fascinating, that it's been suppressed from America.
Yeah, this idea of mechanical sex, this idea that sex is a mechanism, and you know, and often you're a voyeur to the symmetry of what has to happen if reality is a train that's just colliding at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and these are just like the splattered particles that we're experiencing that we feel like is a choice. Then really this is functionalism. This is just the way that it brings things together the most commonly and the most reasonably to us, or the most advantageously, seemingly. We just constantly are going towards what we're told to go towards. I don't know if I always fall for that. So that's the thing I like about this parapsychology view, that you can have a choice over your actions. But still, it seems like it's kind of Buddhist in the sense that it says, like, if you do it, it will change the world. And this has also become the China mind, the China brain, the China. This has always been the one that.
Are you talking? I'm sorry. You're talking about Wilhelm Reich here and parapsychology, or what was your main criticism?
No, I was saying that parapsychology is actually valuable because the idea of strict functionalism still feels voyeuristic, and it doesn't allow for certain things, which the elephant in the room is that there's a certain amount of free will. Otherwise, I would do better or worse. I wouldn't, you know what I mean? Like, why would you be mediocre at being the worst or the best? Sometimes you're good, sometimes you're bad. Humanity is weird. This is clearly something we need to talk about. We're not constantly following perfect symmetry. So there's an inverted spectrum to functionalism that has to be acknowledged as well, which is...
Well, and if you're taking, and they definitely go hand in hand, because if you're talking about structuralism, and you're talking about psychology, you're going to look at these actual experiments, these behaviorists, having electrodes on your brain. MK Ultra would be more of a structuralist. But if you're going to study like the buying trends of humanity, how to get people to all go buy toilet paper, all that, this is going to be more of the functional approach to analyzing all the data and then being able to use that, against them. It's almost like, they can be separate fields, but now you're going to take what we learned through the structuralism, like this image here, it has a physical response in a human to do this. That's structurally sound. That's more of like, in my opinion, that would be like structural psychology. And then you're talking about Skinner and the Pavlov and there. And then if you're going to take and go to the functionalism, you're going to talk about more like Huxley. And they feel it's more of the philosophical, but they're both can be scientifically, used. You can take scientific data from one and they complement each other, because if you didn't have this structuralism foundation to base, neurological activity and show that we can hypnotize and we have mesmerism and we have these things that are effective, then what if the person, you have to ask, if they're not hypnotized, if they're not mesmerized, what is the function of what they're doing too? So I don't know. I mean, there's different ways to analyze the term structuralism and functionalism, and it's and even parapsychology, because that can be, an acronym for paranormal psychology, because people don't call it paranormal psychology. So you can talk about psychologies going hand in hand together, or some people, I don't even know if there's any paranormal psychologists listening, but those are the psychologists that would help your sensitives, or if, and there's not enough of them, because typically people are going to a psychologist.
I would argue that we're increasing because of cybernetic parapsychology is increasing due to technology. So more and more we're considering the future of parahuman. So therefore,
okay, gotcha. That makes sense.
So it is becoming more relevant. So it's something that, at one point maybe it might not have been socioeconomically essential, but as time has gone on, or rather it was only to be looked at a certain way during a time when you needed to be a mother or a father or a husband or a wife or a son or a daughter, or whatever social role they wanted you to play, you had to fit into that role. So there's for a while there where there's individuality, but as time goes on, we start to look at psychology, even in metapsychology, and so it starts to pose more of a circumstance about the condition one's mind is in and in relation to other minds. So it does seem to matter. And then this is why I brought up earlier the Chinese room thing, because a lot of the time we think of it as a Western thought experiment. If the Chinese room has none of the access to the outside symbols, and then a robot's putting the symbols away, can it learn all the symbols correctly? Anatoly Dneprov actually created, as a Ukrainian, the cybernetic allegories for the Chinese mind, which was the idea if you could take all of the Chinese and make a walkie-talkie like system out of each one of them, then they would all be like a giant brain. And so this is the beginning of, not maybe the beginning, but this is as far back as I've traced it, of this idea of psychology for a hive mind, in comparison to this queen bee thing we were talking about earlier, the lone wolf versus the queen beehive brain.
Well, and you can bypass all that. That's great tech to manipulate people, but what you can see clearly what they've done through psychology is this groupthink mentality through the media, which your viewers already know, because the programming right here, if all you're watching, and all you're seeing, and all your coworkers are saying, and all the newspapers are saying, that's the only way to think. There's not a way. And even if you start to think outside of one of those little boxes, it may be vaccines, I should maybe question those. Because it's so many things have been compartmentalized into the group think norm of what's acceptable. To have anyone go away from that is challenging, to be that individual, almost as if you're like a dog running through an electric fence, and you have to break from that entire thing to access the parts of your brain that have been put into this groupthink mentality, not in the way that you're saying with this China experiment. There's the control has been the information, and the information has been believed to be the consensus of the public that everybody's surrounded by. So there's so much research on the problems.
That was also why I wanted to bring up this, actually. So in philosophy, a lot of the time there's this idea of this philosophical zombie. So the philosophical zombie or the P-zombie argument is a thought experiment in philosophy of mind and philosophy of perception that imagines it being that if it could be conceivably existing, logically disproves the idea that physical substance is all that is required to explain consciousness. Such a zombie would be indistinguishable from a normal person, a normal human being, but lack consciousness, experience, qualia, or sentience. So they wouldn't be able to think very straight, they wouldn't be able to perceive. For example, if a philosophical zombie were poked with a sharp object, it would not inwardly feel pain, yet it would outwardly behave as though it did experience pain. So immediately you ask this question to somebody in 1947 and they're going to have a completely different answer than a kid today. You ask a 5-year-old today and they will get that you're talking about a robot. But if you ask the same question to your grandparents, they might still not know the answer. But the thing is, are we creating philosophical zombies, and is that automation, and does that relate to your IAI thing? The answer, I think, is clearly a yes, right? So how does that affect us?
Well, I think those that are unknowing that the AI is coming or already part of the groupthink, they won't care because as they roll it out, the only things that are going to be present are the positives. For example, when I was looking into the IAI group that was from one of our, I think it was even a pro-president campaign, and all of the sponsors underneath the CIA leak that they had, that IAI page, it's getting people to like run to the CIA and give them all their information to be protected. And it's like, it's not necessary for us to give that information because it can be, attained. But if you are doing something that you feel like needs security, it was just like prompting you to contact them and get these people on your side. And so the skeptic or someone that is aware of these things happening would be like, whoa, that's like I don't really want them, whoever they may be, protecting my things. I want to have my own protection. So I think that it's going to come down to this whole waking up and how many people are not following mainstream. We will be the ones that are making an actual decision about the automation. And when you're talking automation, I don't know if you're talking about like going through the drive-through and now, there's no one working at a McDonald's or a fast food place. It's all automated, automated police officers, or what you're referring to.
I like to think of the Flintstones as the perfect future. The Flintstones is not about the past, right? Like it's the same time as the Jetsons. So the Jetsons don't exist yet, so I assume the Flintstones are the future by that logic. So in the Flintstones, how do you get what you want? Well, everything's been genetically modified to serve your needs. You've got machines that are alive that can fly you places. But at the end of the day, it's always your own pedaling of your feet that are causing the car to move. It's always some sort of interaction, and you still have to put energy into it. And I think that's the same thing with and the reason I thought of that story. One time I went to my car, ran out of gas, and I coasted just barely because the way they built it, the parking lot was just at a slight hill. So I coasted out of the highway exit, just barely into the parking lot. And then I had to push it up the hill just slightly with my buddy. But once we turned it, we could get it just across into the McDonald's parking lot and into the drive-thru. And once we got into the drive-thru, we could talk to these people because they wouldn't talk to us if we didn't have a car. And then we found out that the artificial intelligence took over the McDonald's system because they said from now on AI will do the speaking at McDonald's. So at the end of the day, yeah, there was still work going on, but it wasn't, it was my work.
But who decides the work? Because so for me, okay, I don't want AI to do everything. I want to be like, I want to I'm okay turning on my light switches. It'd be nice to have something linked up. But as far as learning and the human brain, when we start talking about that and the things that I would like to be able to learn fast, like if I could learn a bunch of languages by plugging in, that is something I would have to think about. It's kind of like cheating. You said put in the work, put in the time. I'm not putting in the time to learn a language, but somebody last year that didn't have this tech, or that spent 10 years studying in Russian or whatever and is fluent, and I can do that in 30 seconds if I upload it. So when those conversations are within my grasp, if that happens in my lifetime, that would be some serious consideration I have to do, because I could program myself to play the piano, to play instruments. But then, is there still going to be value once I've learned? That I might lose the value I have from the process I took to understand, or maybe I'll have more value if this is. I know it's hypothetical right now, but if I'm programmed, what values stay? And I'd love to be able to be a ninja, but if I program myself to be a ninja, do I go out there and now I shatter my pelvis just doing a move because I know how to do it, but my body isn't in the condition to do ninja moves, even though it knows how to. I don't know. There's a lot of.
That's a good part of functionalism, because you look at like emulation software. So let's say I want to run a Mac and Windows inside of a giant machine that can do both, so I can copy all of your data for the NSA. Let's say. So they're doing this system. Everything has to have a fake chip inside of a giant chip. So there's this giant silicon wafer that's bigger than anyone you've ever seen, and there's hundreds of them stacked. And then those are going to have a digital copy of the chip. Now, in general, you can use that. That's great. But in practicality, let's say I want to play a Sega game that's copied. If it has any sort of difference in it's not exact, like you're saying, then it'll break it, and it won't sound right, it won't look right, and it'll break the body. So let's do that on a human scale, because a Sega game is nothing compared to like a person. If a person's memories are put into a new person, they're not going to feel the same way, just almost ever. Like you take a woman's feelings and you put it in a man's feelings. You take a child's feelings and you put them in an adult's feelings. You take the trauma of a child and put it in an adult, they'll probably be able, some of the dudes are going to be able to deal with it. You're going to take some of these, really hardcore memories and give it to a child, it's going to traumatize them because they're not able to function or even process them yet. So a big part of structural functionalism has to be figuring out, do we have the capacity to even really experience these things? And then are we building some sort of an alternative for when we realize that we've reached our capacity? Do we have anything else that we can put those experiences into?
Well, and what do we lose? So let's say I wanted to be like, all right, give me all the volcano data you have system. What's going to weigh out in my brain? What would take over from what I've studied? And I wouldn't want to lose any of the things that I've, feel like I've authentically learned, because I have a surplus of this other, it's going to be the amount of research, or I don't know how it would work. I don't know enough about AI. I don't know about computers, but I would not want to lose my memories, and even the bad memories. You could probably go back and be like, yeah, I don't want to remember that. And I think that might be great for people that have major trauma that can't move on. And that, this conversation is getting way out of control, but that's going to be like what we get to do. Like at some point when we're the guinea pigs that they're not already testing it on and it's available, it's like if you go to a psychologist and instead of like a pill, they're going to be like, all right, what do you want to forget about your childhood? That sucked. What would you like to see in your future? Would you like some skills to travel? Do you want to learn French?
Well, isn't that the best deal if you can have all of your traumas erased and positive memories enforced? Wouldn't you be a better person for it?
Can they give you that sense of achievement or accomplishment? Because that at the end of the day, AI is just say you feel accomplished, you are accomplished.
Yeah, exactly.
But that to me, I feel like I would override that. I'd feel almost like guilty. I'd be like, all right, so I just plugged this in because I have $1 billion to get this chip that made me learn Russian. I've always wanted to speak this language. That'd be great. But then now that I can speak Russian, I could go read this Russian literature. But you know what? I don't need to read it. I can just take the book and go, and now I have it. And so for me, I would just be an information junkie, and I would just be like taking all these discs, and that's dangerous. Do you get
I can imagine you. So everyone's gonna have their own problems, but your problem is literally gonna be that problem. Like my problem is not gonna be that problem.
There's a language I don't know.
You're gonna have discs that you're gonna want to stick in your head, and you're gonna have to copy memories out of your head and store them somewhere so that you can put memories back in your head. And you're gonna have to be like, oh man, that's right. I can't remember because I wanted to mix that thought with my kid's birthday party about volcanoes and bananas, and I can't cross the information unless I'm connected to the neural lace. And that's why this, neural lace story is so creepy because, Elon Musk said you're gonna be able to listen to music in your head. What he wants to do is he wants to share sexual experiences with friends that are more encouraged. And this is, again, a Reichian thing. But what we're really learning about when we see neural lacing and that brain chips, by the way, are going to be out in the next year. So this is not that far off. This is not that crazy or heady. This is just where, as usual, 6 months before people are used to talking about this. But there's going to be somebody listening to a song in their head in the next 6 months. Bet you a shekel. So Musk's latest venture plan is going to probably be about 3,000, maybe 1,500 people that are going to be the first people that are going to do this. And the way it's going to be set up is they're going to have containing more than 3,000 electrodes attached to the flexible threads thinner than a human hair, which is graphene photovoltaic photo printed on a resin, and they create a graphene tattoo that can attach to the back of your head. They're going to be able to send and receive data. And at first, it's not going to be super impressive, you think, because it's going to take a while to record human thought. But, even at my I wish I had this.
Take a while. Okay, so.
Well, I have this thing you can wear. This is not it, but this is a demonstration that actually records the different parts of your brain. It has about 36 different electrosensors that can.
Why do you have that?
Well, it was a Kickstarter at some point, and I really liked the company. Neuron Motion. I have a lot of these weird tech products.
I've seen those.
It's really cool because you 3D print it. You attach an Arduino chip that has a connection to these sensors. The sensors, it was the first affordable. Everyone can have them if they want.
After they used it on the monkeys and stuff and the mesmerism, they
started. I'm the monkey.
Okay, well,
but I like to take colloidal. I made colloidal silver soda, and I would drink it because I had a soda machine, and then I would test myself, and then I would send that in as college paperwork. And they called that enough homework that you didn't have to keep doing other stuff. So it seemed like it was completely reasonable to me, and it was a good investment because otherwise I would have had to spend thousands of dollars on some reasonable project, and instead you just scan your brain. No one was doing it. Well, anyway. They haven't. My point is.
So this was for a research study.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Well, I was doing a study on the differences between par density and electromagnetic radiation and song.
What were the years?
2012, 13, 2013, 2014, 2013.
13, 14. What you said it one more time. It was called what? Power density?
I don't remember the exact name of the paper because I always have a really long, ridiculous name for my papers, but it had to do with sonication, the difference between electromagnetic radiation and par density, because par density is light, so you could use LEDs, and it also had to do with the uses of par density light while you were, doing a number of if also colloidal metals. We were looking at colloidal. It got to be a thing where we're like, okay, in this circumstance, carbonated colloidal metals actually seem to help you in your neural pathways to make more parts of your brain light up at the same time. Mm-hmm. So you can.
Who funded this? Or who funded your research?
It was
the thing.
The Kickstarter thing was like $200. It was, I just set it up and I think I emailed them early on and asked if I could get it for free, and I couldn't, and I decided it was worth getting. So that was,
And they just said, send us data on how you feel, or where were these electrode, the things
no, you had? The thing is basically the way it works is you get kind of a computer chip that has points to it on an IPO board, mm-hmm. and the IPO board then connects to 17 or 36 different parts of your brain.
And where does that information get sent to? Nobody?
They have a software, and then you open the software on your computer. It's all open source.
What's the software?
Oh gosh.
Fringe.
What's it called?
You said you watched Fringe. Does anybody in the comments watch Fringe?
What's it called? The EMF brain. What was it called? The ganglion. And
we can do this later. I just would like to write this down so that I have the information. And if anybody else has done similar
Open
experiments.
BCI. It was called Open BCI. That was what it was.
Okay, thank you. That's it. All right, moving on.
No, I'll show you guys because you can still probably buy these things. So the BCI, $99, Ultra Cortex chip, allows you to connect your brain to all of these little green guys here, which can scan the electromagnetic radiation from what part of your brain is putting out which kind of data. And so it was a really great project. It's still around. If you look up Open BCI, they've got a website. I still do some of their, I still look at their stuff. I haven't really contributed anything in like a few years. But, you know, basically this is what it looks like. You can see the different waves.
And this is how they're developing all the AI based on people sending in things like this, I would say. Sort of.
I mean, this is one of the things that
or how they're getting.
If you're really interested in that, you should look into OpenCog. If you're interested in artificial intelligence, that's a whole other
story. Okay, maybe
so you have to
a different video, because what I'm saying is
you have to think of it as like two things that connect at like two tunnels that meet in the middle. So what OpenCog is doing is learning how cognition functions, and they're building a cognitive system. What OpenBCI is doing is they're opening up the brain, and they're looking at what kinds of waves are coming out of which parts of the brain and at what times, and they're measuring that, you know, from different systems. And you can use this to control your computer or to control your wheelchair or to put out the thought of a word. And so that's why these are.
Who do they send their data to? Who does OpenBCI, in order to function, they have to send their data to somebody? I'm saying I don't want to. I like to research this before I'm on anything endorsing.
I don't know. I mean, like,
anyway,
first off, that doesn't really make any sense. So that's a weird question. So the reason is the question you're asking is who do they have to send their data to has nothing to do with who I have to send my data to. If they created the software and they put it on GitLab, Microsoft owns GitLab. So everybody's data, all the patents, that's like owned by the patent office. Good for them.
So you volunteered your brain.
Hold on. When I record my brain recordings are now in my computer. So unless I get hacked or I sell my data, then my data is my own. So that has absolutely neither.
So you don't. So none of your data got sent anywhere. It wasn't for anything. They gave it to you.
I definitely
without you having to send it to anyone.
I definitely choose to send my data about my brain scans to my school and to the news group and to people that work on brain scans, because that's why.
Look into MK Ultra a little bit, maybe. Anyway, moving on to volcanoes.
You got some volcano stuff?
No. I think that we should actually, we should set up a different time to do a volcano video and get Peter or volcano people on here.
We can get volcanoes with Peter. We can get volcanoes with Peter. That sounds like a good thought.
Yeah, right. Since I want to run it by him and stuff. But this was enlightening.
Yeah, 3 hours and 16 minutes in, I'm kind of tired. I think we should do the volcano video soon. Guys,
all right.
I'm sorry.
Can you get my name off here, by the way? Like, everybody's got, like...
Well, they wanted to know. They were like, who's that lady?
Blocking out your screen.
All right. Well,
volcanoes to come, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thanks a lot, guys. Recent Tartarians.